Right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Adults and Health Committee of Cambridgeshire County Council. Today, the 12th of December 2024, I'm Councillor Richard Howitt, Chair, and a warm welcome to everyone for joining our meeting, both here in the room and also online. Just all the usual reminders that we allow filming and photography at our meetings. Feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting, but please everyone turn off your mobile phones or put them on vibrate only to avoid any disturbance. The meeting is indeed being live streamed and the recording will be available on the County Council's website afterwards. Housekeeping points: when you wish to speak, simply raise your hand, and between myself and the Vice Chair, Councillor Van de Ven, we'll keep a speakers list. In accordance with the Constitution, I'll briefly adjourn the meeting for a comfort break if the meeting exceeds 2 hours. There's no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I'll adjourn the meeting and we will leave via the side doors here on my left and use the fire escape next to the kitchen to make the way to the assembly point in the car park. This afternoon, because CPFT health scrutiny has been moved from December to January for very proper reasons that they couldn't make themselves available, we will be adjourning the meeting, but then continuing in private session, and Val, our acting Director of Public Health, will make a presentation to help prepare us for scrutiny on health inequalities in January. So I just ask for people's understanding if we do that. I'm just back from the National Children's and Adult Social Care Conference, which I attended with Patrick, our Executive Director, and also colleagues from the children's and young people's sphere as well. It's an important opportunity to share experiences with other councils nationally. And the real learning point I brought back, perhaps more than any other, is how far co-production, the actual direct voice and influence of people who are service users, has gone up the priority list. It was in every single discussion that we had, and so the personal learning point for me is for us as members to constantly be asking questions and challenging about how far service users are directly involved in co-producing services. I know that there's a lot of work that has been done on that already by the service, but it is proper that we spend, in my view, more time discussing that. We've also, as the chair of the council read out at the full council in introduction on Tuesday, advanced in terms of the process for the Care Quality Commission to come and assess our adult social care services. And I think this is such an important moment for all of us that I will ask Patrick, our Executive Director, Patrick Warren-Hinks, to just say a few words about exactly where we are and what's happening.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, committee, just to be aware that so the CQC assessment was something that came out of the Health and Social Care Act, and individual councils will receive notification. It was the plan was over the 2 years from the announcement of the Act, and so we received notification on the 11th of November in an email from CQC that we had a period of, well, we think it was 3 weeks, but actually it was up to the 6th of December to submit our evidence to the Care Quality Commission ahead of their on-site visit. So the information that was required in that 3-week period was partner information, stakeholder information. We were required to produce a self-assessment of how we felt our adult social care service was operating within Cambridgeshire. And we were also required to submit a data pack alongside an information return. That forms our evidence towards the CQC, so they can assess the council from speaking to partners, speaking to stakeholders. They will look at our evidence that we submitted. They will also look at information that's available to the general public, that's available nationally, that we do some returns to government, etc., and which they will look at. Just in terms of the scale of the work that was involved by the team, and I must state a huge thanks to everybody that's been involved within the team and the wider council and our partners, because we submitted an 87-page self-assessment document and we included 191 pieces of information. So there was a huge amount of work that took place in order to submit that by the 6th of December. But we were fortunate that that work concluded. There was lots of work done by everybody and we were able to submit that. The data pack gives our performance data on specific questions, such as waiting lists, but other information that will help to triangulate to the things we say in our self-assessment, to the information that we return and the way that the data is then portrayed. We now have to wait for a period of up to 6 months for the Care Quality Commission to notify us and to come in to do what we call site visits. They will give us 6 to 8 weeks notice ahead of their visit, but that could come any time in the next, we think, up to 6 month period. During the visit, they will look at a number of our case files and they will then start to dig deeper, talking to our teams to understand how we work with individuals and their families. But they will also want to speak to focus groups. They will also want to speak to the committee chair, the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board. They will also want to speak to other partners as well to try and, in doing so, to make sure that what we say in our self-assessment is really what's happening on the ground. This is what our CQC want to do. They want to be assured that we're doing work, and that will include what we're doing work about the voice of people. So Councillor Howitt talked about co-production being front and centre. We've had to do a lot of work around our evidence base of how we involve people in our decisions, in the work that we do, in our long-term plannings, and how we learn from feedback that we receive. We are planning a range of workshops. We will continue because you can appreciate 6 months is a long time. We want to make sure that this remains front and centre of everybody's mind going forward. So we've got workshops with staff planned for the new year. We'll make sure that we continue to brief people, and we will also work specifically with those individuals who the CQC want to meet, those focus groups, committee chairs, etc., to support them effectively, so that once CQC arrive, we are as prepared as we can be to give them that kind of confidence and assurance of the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Okay, and the only thing I'd add in terms of our position as members, and there isn't a difference here between what Patrick would say and what I would say, we're not going to claim we're perfect. No council should, and we definitely don't want to. We want an honest and candid process where we're proud of the good things that we do, and we will certainly want to showcase that, but where we also want to show we recognise where there are weaknesses and we've got clear plans in order to address them, and that we want our staff and everyone involved to be very honest in that. It's not about selling it and just hoping we get a gold star at the end of it. It's about using this process as part of improving the service, which is something we all want to do anyway, not seeing it as some sort of additional burden just from outside. And so that's the message I give constantly when I'm in discussion with staff, and it's one that I also encourage others to share. You want to add something?
Yes, apologies. I just meant to say, so concluding the visit, there will be a period of time where the Care Quality Commission will consider their findings and then produce a report. At the moment, we understand that's about 2 months after their end of their visit that they would produce a report, and there will also be a one-word judgment. So that's, at the moment, it's 4 levels. It's either good, requires improvement, inadequate, or outstanding. And they've got a scale which they will measure their findings against that. So there'll be a one-word judgment and a written paper as a result, which they then produce and publish on their website. But again, we will make sure that we keep committee and others well cited and versed on all of the progress we make towards their on-site visit and the subsequent report that follows.
And can I just say, because of where I'm sitting, I can see all the staff at the back. And when Patrick talked about the hard work they've been doing to get the self-assessment done, there were a lot of wry smiles at the back because people have been working very, very hard on this. I'm very aware of that, and I thank everyone for doing that. Okay, we'll keep you in touch with that as the process goes on, but I'm glad that we've got that on the record and got everyone up to date by saying that. We now move into the meeting proper, and we start with apologies for absence and apologies for absence, which Enda, our Democratic Services Officer, will tell us.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Costello, who will be substituted by Councillor Count, but I know he has been held up on the way, but will be with you as soon as he can. Apologies also from Councillor Prentice, who is substituted by Councillor Boulat.
And Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies. I'm going to need to leave the private session this afternoon no later than 3 o'clock.
Thank you. Any others? Yes, please.
Firstly, my apologies for being late, but the bad accident on Warboys Road, made the journey horrendous. But I also will not be able to stay for the afternoon session as I have a hospital appointment.
Thank you for telling us, and we fully understand that there's been some delay on the roads coming here today. Anyone else? Councillor Boulat, and when you rise, Councillor Count, very welcome to be part of our deliberations today. Thank you very much for joining us. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Councillor Bowden again.
I'm inclined, Chair, to make a declaration now, although I do have in my declaration of interests that I am leader of Fenland District Council. But when we are dealing with agenda item number 5, we will be discussing the role that district councils play so far as housing benefit is concerned. So I'll declare that interest now, and it is a subject which I will raise.
I think you're bending over backwards to be transparent there, which is fine, but I see no conflict of interest of any kind, just to say that. And in fact, the knowledge and experience you're going to bring will be helpful to the debate, in my view. Any other declarations of interest? No, that's fine. We now have the minutes of the meeting on the 10th of October. First of all, can we agree the minutes as an accurate record? Any objections? I'm seeing nods all round, and this is that moment when I sign them and pass them over so that doesn't get forgotten. So that's carried. We next turn to the action log, pages 25 to 29 in the agenda pack. Any questions on the action log? Councillor Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two issues to raise. And the first one concerns minute 265, right care, right person, which I've discussed before. I think, look, the action log is blank because presumably the work on this is ongoing. When I first raised the matter, which was a couple of meetings back, I think I was probably more concerned about the risks arising to the county, whether there were more staff going to be required, more work and more cost. But I think I don't know if we've all received a recent report by the King's Fund on this matter. And I now realise that this is a much more complex area than I ever thought it was. I'm sure that officers knew exactly how complex this was, which is perhaps why we don't have phases 2 and 3 reports. But I don't know how unusual this is, but I'm going to ask, and I know that officers, and particularly Patrick, has got a massive workload, but this subject be an agenda item in future, because I think there are so many more complexities to it than just some work for officers and more money. It involves safeguarding and a whole range of other issues, and almost certainly more staff. Sorry, have I overstepped here?
Well, let's try and deal with it. I think it's fine for you to raise a question on the action log, and what I hear is that you're still awaiting a report on minute number 265. I
don't want it just to be confined to a small footnote on the action log.
Okay, I hear that. I am being advised that I should curtail this a little. So I will ask Rishenda, unless Patrick wants to come in. We'll ask Rishenda just to respond to that.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to clarify, obviously, this is questions about the actual actions which are on the minutes action log, rather than going more broadly. Obviously, anything about additional agenda items can be picked up when you look at the committee forward plan.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I don't know where I would otherwise have raised it if it wasn't on this particular
Okay,
point.
I'm keen. I think it's perfectly proper for members to raise issues to the best of their ability. I could see this coming into a future finance monitoring report, I have to say. So maybe we could minute that I've said that, and that could be considered by officers. I think you had a second point as well, Councillor Seif.
Sorry, just to clarify the point on indemnity, professional indemnity insurance. It's not that clear from the minutes, but I was actually referring, when I talked about healthcare providers, I was talking about the insurance companies, people like Bupa and PPP and so forth. And it's about the words here were being indemnified. I think I was only talking not about our staff. Clearly, they're covered by our own policies, self-insurance or whatever, but self-employed therapists and counsellors and other social workers who are acting either for an agency or independently, who will need and should have professional indemnity insurance. So is that being checked out?
Okay, could you just say the number on the action log?
Oh, I beg, but I think
we're
it's
looking
pretty
at.
much the last
Have you
one.
got it in front of you? I think Patrick's got it in front of him, so he can comment. Patrick, please.
Yeah, no, that's helpful that you clarified that, Councillor Seif. We are looking into it, but it's helpful that you've clarified that. So we will look into that and we will come back further into that point.
Okay, I think that has been successfully dealt with. Councillor Daunton.
Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you. Action 267, mental health, section 75 agreement extension. Is there any comment on that? There's nothing on the papers here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure why the comments aren't there. We certainly said we would take something to spokes on that paper, and we will do. So there will be a deep dive going to the spokes as an update.
Okay, thanks. I'm keen to know. Thank you.
Anything else on the action log from anyone? Okay, and officers will have noted that members read it very carefully, which is very, very good. Thank you very, very much. We now go to public questions. We did have one tabled from a Mr. Fulton, but I don't see him. Can I just check that he's not here? So I think, does that lapse or it gets replied in writing?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Mr. Fulton's question has been circulated to committee members, so everyone's seen that and it has been published on the website. So a written response will be sent.
Thank you very much. We now move to item 4, which is the first of our new strategy reports. Members will know that we've had a bit of a tussle, which we won in the end, to say we can have long-term strategy discussions as well as key decisions. And so this is the first one to enable us to understand what our officers are researching and thinking about, rather than bringing us a direct decision and for us to influence that. It's in the crucial area of accommodation. And I'm particularly pleased that Richard Hills, our acting head of commissioning, and Shauna Torrance are here to present. But just before I ask them to do so, I'll ask Councillor Bowden to say something.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and I very much welcome this strategic opportunity for us to consider this matter. I just wonder if I may make a request, please, and that is that there be some emphasis on explaining to us who are these working age adults that this paper is about. Could we have more explanation about who they are, and also what the needs that they have are, including how any interrelationship there may be with the NHS. And my apologies for asking this at the very beginning, but I thought it might be helpful, given that we're talking about a strategic matter, for us to be quite clear who it is that we're talking about, because I understand this is about individuals, and it's all too easy for us just to look at this in terms of words on a piece of paper, but we're talking about individuals. I'd like to know who these individuals are.
You got your question in early, Councillor Bowden. You're not normally shy in coming forward, and you certainly weren't there, but that question has been heard. I don't know whether it's me but I'm having some difficulty hearing people today. So can I just encourage people, including the presenters, to get as close to the microphone as possible when you speak. And Susan has just nodded that she's also experiencing that. So yeah, you do have to be quite close to the microphone when you speak. So can I ask people to take that into account? So Richard Hills, Service Director for Commissioning, Shauna Torrance, Head of Adult Social Care Commissioning, are both here, and we invite you to speak to us.
Okay, first things first. Can everybody hear me? I do have a loud voice, so whether I even need the mic is in question. Let's get straight into, I was going to do 3 points for intro, but let's get straight into working age. It's a term used generally in adult social care. It means adults aged 18 to 64. So in all our statutory reports, we tend to report on over 65s and under 65s, and we refer to it as working age adults. It's a very broad umbrella. What we're mainly talking about here, though, is people with mental health needs and learning disability as their primary support reason. This is what we're really getting at in this paper is a level of complex need as well with those working age adults. Obviously, we provide services right across the care ladder from voluntary sector type support and prevention all the way through to complex housing needs and right up to nursing. What this is focused on, obviously, is complex needs where housing is accommodation is required as well. So that's the focus in terms of working age. The other thing I wanted to say is I also welcome the opportunity to bring a strategic paper here. I think it highlights some tricky issues. What we didn't want to do is just bring strategy papers that have all the answers. The point is we want a real conversation with you about this. I just wanted to give it some context and say accommodation is a problem right across the country. It's not, this paper isn't flagging something very specific to Cambridgeshire. Finding the right housing and getting the right accommodation pipeline for this kind of provision is difficult everywhere. So I think that's why it makes such a good first strategic paper, because we can really get into it, because this is a knotty issue. And I've been in adult social care around about almost 20 years now, and it wasn't recognised back then the importance of good accommodation alongside good quality care, that you need both at this complex end of care to really be able to support people in your own county with the right outcomes. So I think that's really important to say. And the final, and I think those are the 3 points, actually. I've covered them all. So I'm going to hand over to Shauna, and she's going to do a quick introduction. But obviously, we want to give time in this strategic paper for discussion and conversation.
So I'll now take you through a quick overview of the paper. The paper sets out for committee the growing demand and shortfall of accommodation we have in Cambridgeshire to meet the needs of people of a working age with complex needs. This is evident through our comparably high waiting times for services within these areas and the number of people we are currently placing outside of county. Our projections indicate that to keep pace with demand, an average of 42 additional units will be required every year until 2041 if nothing changes. To tackle this, we have been working closely with district councils, local developers and providers to create a pipeline of new accommodation, which currently extends over the next 2 years, but there is more work to be done. Section 3.4 highlights the longer term strategic intentions for progressing this work. These place emphasis on adopting a more preventative approach that support people to remain within their own home or within general housing for as long as possible. We also seek to use an evidence-based approach and ensure that our needs assessments, projections and data analysis are up to date, but we're also drawing upon best practice when we're designing the approach. And that we're co-producing with people with lived experience when we're addressing those gaps, to ensure that the accommodation developed is in the right locations with the right infrastructure and access to local networks and communities, and are using the best practice design principles to make sure they're achieving the best possible outcomes through the work we are doing. Building on the work which has taken place to date, we are seeking to explore and test a number of options which are set out in 3.6 of the report, and we will welcome committee's views on these today. These options range from maximising the use of general housing, working with our local district councils, to developing strategic partnerships with local registered providers and social landlords, and the potential release or redevelopment of council-owned assets. To address demand, likely using a hybrid approach potentially across in-house services and independent commission providers. We cannot do this alone. Developing a long-term pipeline of accommodation to meet demands, as Richard has said, requires engagement and is a really complex, multifaceted process, which will require multiple partner input, support from other internal council departments, and needs to be progressed under a sustained effort over a longer period of time. However, successfully doing this will produce a number of significant benefits. It will reduce the amount of time people have to wait for services. It will improve outcomes for people accessing services. It will mean that we're able to place people closer to home and ensure that they remain within their community and support network and infrastructure. And it will also reduce costs associated with this provision for the council. With this in mind, over the next 12 months, we will be refreshing our current demand profiles to ensure they are current, up to date, and account for any changes that have taken place recently and the most up-to-date census information. We will be looking to expand the pipeline of services beyond 2 years to reach a far longer timescale. And we will be looking to develop a plan to target capital funding to support this shortfall of need. And engaging with local property developments and people with lived experience to support with this process. We expect to return to committee in June 2025 with some plans drawing on the feedback today and some key recommendations as to how we will progress this.
Great, thank you to you both. And Richard's point that this doesn't have all the answers is very well made, and that's the purpose of having this discussion. I see Councillor Daunton, then Councillor Bowden. Councillor Daunton.
Thank you. I'm looking at page 41 of the, well, thanks very much, Shauna, for the report and the presentation. Page 41, the release of council estates for specialist supported accommodation. You refer there to council-owned assets. Are you referring to district council-owned assets or county council-owned assets? And is there some exploration of county-owned land and making available county-owned land for housing, for specialist housing developments? That's one question. And my second question is, you referred to plans for the next 12 months. How are you planning for the next 5-10 years with partners to deal with this problem?
There's going to be a lot of questions, so if you can make a note of them, we're going to take a whole clutch together rather than do one-to-one question and answer. Councillor Bowden next, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Slightly to follow up one of the questions raised by Councillor Daunton, I'm also interested in the owned assets that are mentioned and the particular importance that if we are talking about local authority assets or registered provider assets, they at least are able to have housing benefit recovered. Whereas if you're not talking about a registered provider, we're not talking about housing benefit being able to be recovered. And that's quite important in terms of the liability that there may be, which may lie on a district council rather than on the county council. But it is important that we're aware of that block that there may be so far as a district council is concerned when we're working in partnership with them. I asked at the beginning to have some indication of whom we are talking about here. And I want this to be looked at in terms of individuals. It's all too easy for us to lump people together and to say, well, individuals with mental health problems and with learning disabilities as though they are one single group. And they're not. It's made up of a whole host of individuals, a wide spectrum of individuals. And I'm interested to know if within what we are talking about here, we are talking about the width, the breadth of the learning disabilities, for example, including those individuals who are capable of doing either voluntary work or being in paid employment. And the reason I mention that is I think it's really important. I know this is about housing, but we need to look at people's needs as a whole. And in the country as a whole, and I'm certainly not singling out Cambridgeshire, there's no reason for me to do so, but in the country as a whole, it is quite scandalous the extent, and I know, Chair, you agree with me on this, it's quite scandalous to the extent that individuals with learning disabilities are not encouraged and supported in gaining the personal advantage which they could have, the personal dignity that they could have through having employment, whether that be voluntary or paid employment. And I'm just wondering whether there is any thought about, first of all, are we talking within this paper about some of the individuals who would be so capable? And secondly, how are we trying to link the housing element and the location of the housing element with the potential for employment?
The link is a very, I'm not saying the other points weren't good, but the link is a very important point there in that question. We've got several members still to come in. Councillor Seif.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, my questions follow from the other two, of course. They seem to be separate questions, or they may seem to be, but one, I was sort of a bit alarmed to hear you say that where we can't accommodate people in need, we transfer them to other authorities. Presumably they've got the same problem, so exactly how are they coping? But that led to the question about what sort of accommodation is required. Now, I can use my imagination as to what facilities and specification we may have for this housing, but I'd like to ask you, what do you think would be the ideal? And obviously there's issues around safeguarding and a whole raft of other facilities that people of working age who have these needs will require. But what you thought might be the additional cost above, if you like, normal housing? And does that apply, just going back to the point Councillor Bowden was making, does that apply right across the board? I mean, there will be people with severe mental incapacity who will need a different type of accommodation from one who is perhaps able to live independently or reasonably independently with a little bit of management and supervision. So sorry, I've linked a whole range of things there, but they do follow on from what everybody else has asked.
Thank you. I've got so many members. I want to take it in 2 rounds. So I'll take a couple more members, then I'll come back to officers, and then there'll be a second round of member comments. Councillor Slatter is next, please.
Thank you. Well, I could do a roundup in terms, and do hope to have another go at the questions. But the question about using our own assets, I have my eye on Fawcett House, as many officers know, and councillors I've already lobbied. And in there, I have a vision that we could indeed deal with lifetime homes with those extra added gadgets and people that are required as and when they're needed. My vision comes from having combined being a chair of planning with looking after what used to be called the incurables as a nurse. Then they were the young adults. But I like the working age adults phrase because some of them were people I got ready to go out to work, some to go off to watch the football, etc. And that understanding of either acquired disability or disability from birth or worsening disability, all of these need different adaptations, physical adaptations and care adaptations. So there is no way I'm going to ask you what do you want because you can't answer that question. But what we do need is something that has on site in independent or shared accommodation of one sort or another, things that can adapt to people's changing needs without them having to forever move somewhere else because something gets worse or something changes. And it's that sort of vision that I know is not cheap, but is such an important investment in the individuals who are our responsibility. So I'd love to poke my nose into this one if I can. For years to come, because it's such a passion of mine. So I think it's not a question, it's a sort of, please, can I get involved? And please don't forget Fawcett House. It shouldn't be lost as an absolutely ideal location. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last one in this round is Councillor van der Ven, please.
Thank you. I'll try to be quick. I hear what Councillor Bowden says, and I note that many of our reports over the years have had really helpful case studies about what it means to be in a particular situation. And that has helped me to understand the issue of rising complexity of need. And I'm concerned that this is in the public consciousness because we are talking about housing and planning, and we're getting to very local provision. And I think we don't have this enough in our true public consciousness that we need to make space, we need to make room in our communities for this type of housing. And when we're working with districts on planning, there is an intense local conversation that goes on. And so I think that that kind of awareness is really important. This work is, firstly, it's fantastic to have this paper here today. Thank you so much. And it's great to have strategic papers back. We need to think broadly across public services. This particular issue is highlighted in the work of the Health and Wellbeing Board ICP. It forms part of the overview of the priorities for housing and mental health. It also happens at a time nationally when there are a lot of questions about what's coming in terms of policy on social care and planning. So there, in a way, it's a really opportune moment to think about this. We don't know how the rules are going to change. But I think the huge challenge is the collaboration that others have referred to. I mean, working across different authorities that have the responsibilities to deliver something so important and so complex. I mean, my question would be, what has the response thus far been from districts engaged in local planning at different stages? What has been the response of registered social landlords, and what has been the response of developers? Thank you.
Richard and Shauna.
Well, if we were worried we weren't going to get a lot of debate and a lot of good questions, that's certainly answered that already, hasn't it? Let's get to the top and we'll work our way down, and we'll probably do a bit of a double act, if I'm honest. So the first question was about land, and really we were referring there to County Council Cambridgeshire sites. There is sort of an asset disposal strategy, if you like, in terms of making savings, and we think the potential is there to not only get a capital receipt for the council, which is important in terms of balancing our books and our budget, but also there may be a double win by able to put in either children's or adults social care, the right housing and the right accommodation, that we can start to think about. That's better for us in terms of coming back to that question about placing out of county, which we don't want to do. We want the right housing in county. So yes, we're talking to our partners right across the council about this, and saying, and we're trying to flag for those sites at any time. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, in relation to district councils, we are in active conversations with district councils. So they are identifying sites potential where there's potential to develop social housing, or as part of their local plans where we're developing housing in general. We are looking at opportunities to build accommodation to meet these needs into those settings, and there are a number of areas on our pipeline under development at the moment.
And that's one of our first wins, really, is getting a 2-year pipeline that the districts have helped. And shout out to Lisa behind that's been instrumental in getting that together for us. So it sort of comes to your second question, which is the 5 to 10 years. And that's another reason to bring this paper here, is it's exactly what we're after. Housing needs a 10-year pipeline. And historically around the country, that hasn't been in place. And that's why we find ourselves where we do. And where we find a pipeline where there's more traditional residential homes, nursing homes, but not necessarily this new type of accommodation that we're really looking for. To come back to the point of personalisation, we're trying to get away. I mean, it's considered now, it's becoming considered now more bad practice to place people of working age, whether that be LD, mental health, into residential accommodation, rather than these more bespoke, personalised specialist accommodation. So yeah, we absolutely are looking for that 5 to 10 year pipeline, working in partnership with the districts, because it's just so important for supply. If I can come to the next question, which was registered providers, absolutely. This is the model, isn't it? If councils are going to balance a budget within the next 10 years, is that actually the hotel costs, I suppose, as they're referred to, are picked up through housing benefit, through use of registered providers. I come from Bristol City Council, who was very, very already using this method and had lots of conversations with registered providers, and they would be quite prepared to pay a capital receipt for land from Bristol City, and then we would follow up with plans to use that site for social care accommodation, for that specialist accommodation. So we've already written out, or Lisa has, written out to registered providers to ask their interest in this, and they've already come back, I think it's 2 have already come back to express an interest in wanting to sit down and talk to us about this. So we're quite excited about that as an option, because I absolutely think that's the way to do it, in partnership with registered providers.
In terms of flexibility for a flexible provision and ensuring that people have access to employment opportunities and can operate as part of their local communities and contribute and receive the benefits of that, that is absolutely where we are heading with this. The reason I highlighted the co-production with people with lived experience and the location of accommodation as a really important part of this programme is that it is really important that though people's homes are located in settings that allow them to engage in employment wherever possible, that give them access to that local community provision, that allow them to integrate and be part of that local community and contribute to it and receive the benefits of support as part of that. So just to confirm, that will form a very key part of this. It may look different depending on where we are in the county, and that's in line with our place-based approach and the feedback from individuals living within those areas.
Let's go on to the next one, shall we? Ideal accommodation required. I mean, there's a lot of debate on this. What is the ideal accommodation? A lot of places need, we are talking about the very complex end. So a lot of these people that use these services will need 24/7 support. And so we also still want them to have their own tenancy, their own flat, not a residential room type thing. So a lot of it's core and cluster, they call it, where there's on-site accommodation for staff full-time, but there is also up to 6 flats, and those 6 flats are specially designed, wheelchair access, whatever the requirement is, and they're often bespoke, each of the 6 flats for the individual need. And then when someone moves out, the flat will probably need some modification again for the next person, because these are quite specialist units. So that's kind of the model around the country that we're looking at. Do you want to comment on?
Yeah, I think range is also important. So in the paper, we talk about that preventative approach as well. So where someone can access general needs housing through our district councils, we absolutely want to facilitate that pathway. And then there's a range of options in between that. So shared accommodation might be the right option for someone. They might, a young person might enjoy living with peers in a shared accommodation. So I think whilst we need the core and cluster as the most outcome-based approach at the more complex ends, it's really important we develop that flexible pathway to meet people's aspirations and needs and well-being the whole way through.
Next question was about having to place people out of county, and that is something all of the country's wrestling with, and we're all fighting over not enough supply of this core and cluster or shared accommodation. So it's being done to us, we are doing it to others. It's a sign that there isn't, and which is why we're here with this paper, there just isn't enough of the right supply. In terms of supported accommodation, which is mainly working age adults with specialist needs, we're placing 1 in 5 outside of the county, which is not what we want to do due to specialists. Now, some of that will be a family requirement because their family lives somewhere else, they need to be near family, but some of it is absolutely because of supply. That's less placed out of county than other places, I have to say, but it's still more than we'd want, and that's why we're bringing to you today the working age adults, because on average they'll wait up to 145 days from the care plan to actually getting into a supported accommodation unit. You know, that's the longest wait of any of our supply. When you talk about dom care, they're waiting a matter of, you know, a week, 2 weeks. So we know where our demand pressures are, and that's why we want to focus on this supply, because this needs housing to be able to keep people in county. Next. What's next?
I'm got to hurry you up a bit. I don't want to, but I've got to hurry you up a bit.
I think we're on to our last two, and I think they're quite quick. So we are working just in terms of tangible sites that we're developing from council assets. We are working with closely with our strategic assets team to review those sites against our demand and our needs profile, and work out how we could facilitate access or use of those sites. So I will pose the question of Fawcett House in relation to that with them. And then in relation to the response from district councils, partners and local providers, I think we've already said that we've had a really good response from registered landlords who are really keen to work with us on addressing this need. And our district councils have for some time now been really supportive of this approach. So we developed the published demand profiles that are online at the moment in partnership with them, and they will form part of any update to housing plans or have already been incorporated. So we have a well-established network that we can use in Cambridgeshire.
Okay, second round of comments. Everyone's got a right to speak for up to 5 minutes, but if you can restrict it to about 2 minutes, that would help us get the maximum number of people in. Councillor Taylor is first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hang on a minute. Thank you. Is that okay? I think one of my questions already been answered, and you spoke about the local plan. Just to let you know, and you probably do know, Huntingdonshire have an emerging local plan. So I think it's really good if you want that long-term strategy to get in there now. I want to pick up on the development of strategic partnership with local registered landlords. Certainly within my casework, my husband is a district councillor as well, and he picks up a lot of the casework within the housing area. And I think what my worry is, knowing that there are certain registered landlords that are struggling to house complex needs children already living in social houses, how confident are you or, you know, with this positive outcome working with social landlords? Because at the moment they can't even find a property for complex needs with children within our ward. So I've got real reservations how you are going to work with them. This is to build a purpose house for this family with children, 2 children with these needs.
Thank you very much. Councillor Black, please.
Thanks very much, Chair, and I'm also very pleased to see we've got a strategic report, and I thank the officers for the great work they're doing on this. I was looking at and wondering, one of the big things I note from this report is it's saying that the planned developments will only keep pace with the increasing need, but not address the shortfall that we've got at the moment. So, I mean, that's the main sort of worry I sort of bring away from this. I wonder if there's any of the district councils are doing very well in sort of the helping with the need here, or if there's others that are not doing so well. The main thing I suppose I want to say is we really do want to get some of these people back in county, and hopefully we could try some more in-house solutions than we have before. And I think that's perhaps something that hasn't been tried enough. But yeah, thanks very much for your work.
And thank you. Councillor Howell, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, this is more a question, I think, for the Director of Adult Social Services as opposed to the speakers. With regards to 3.15 and 3.16, especially 3.16. I'll just read it out for everybody's benefit. Over half the placements made out of county at the request of the service user or their family. Now, many years ago, we put a stop to that and said that the only time we would use out-of-county placements is if we couldn't have the specialised need ourselves. So I'm surprised at that, and I'm just asking to come back, not now, to come back with what has been the change, please, because we found out-of-county placements to be extremely expensive, and therefore that's why a stop was made. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Count, please. And by the way, welcome. We know that you were held up on the roads, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Chair. There was an accident one way, and then when I went the other way, there was actually a road shut, so possible to get here. But apologies for that. Yeah, one question follows on from Councillor Howell, and that is the out-of-county service users. The 20% of are out-of-county, 10% are because we can't meet their needs, so it's the specialist provision, and the other 10% are at the request of the individual or the family. And I wanted to know, if the request is at the individual or the family, if their need can be met inside county and there's a difference in cost, is there a decision to be made, and who is the decision maker and who pays that difference in cost? Who decides whether it could be out of county or not? Plus, what is the criteria if the need is met outside the county through the request of the service users or their family? How is it that the costs remain with us and is not moved to the other county? So I should know the answer to that one, but unfortunately I don't. I'd like to ask a second question about the graphs on page 37, indicating the different demands throughout the city, Fenland, East Cambs, etc. And they are also reflected in a table earlier on. But there's an absolutely stark difference between, if we take Fenland and Cambridge City. The line for Cambridge City on page 37 is relatively flat, whereas the line for Fenland is really, really steep. You're talking about a difference of 98 people or 244 individuals. So, and that changes with each of them. So what's the rationale that one area would have a much greater difference than another? And third and final one is 12 million is currently being built into the business plan for the current need that's unsustained. Either with that 12 million or with the future plan, will there be something coming forward with some matched lowering of or savings proposals? Because obviously the proposal is to meet the demand in county and reduce that premium being charged to us. So there should be some sort of measurable savings plan attached. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you very much. It's really welcome to have a strategy paper. Thank you very much, because it does afford us an opportunity to step back and think a bit broader about these issues. And, you know, there's such pressure and such intensity of sort of urgent here and now kind of decisions that it's really, it is really helpful, I think, for everybody to take a step back and have a little bit of a longer view and a wider brief, which is sort of the way I've approached reading this paper. And so I've got, I guess, a couple of questions. One is in framing the problem that we have. I really echo what Councillor van der Ven has said about explaining why demand is rising. You know, it's obviously, you've referenced, it's a national problem, and it's not very well articulated and well known. It's kept within this sort of department area, whereas it is a wider social problem, and it'd just be really helpful to unpack that idea a bit more, not here, but sort of in the thinking generally, because that is helpful, because within that we'll suggest maybe other solutions as well. So why is demand increasing? In reference, in passing reference, there's been a couple of points mentioned about we place people outside, and presumably people are placed inside. You know, other counties are placing their residents with us. So in a sense, in that is suggested a sort of more of a partnership approach because this is a national problem, and all the, it's not a criticism, but it's just a sort of that then I noticed that a lot of the kind of solutions are all within county, so they're all a little bit inward. So we've set the frame on what we can do within the county. Is just an observation. It's a practical one. It's a practical response. I completely understand why, but in a sense, is there an opportunity to look a little bit broader? It's just a question. Thank you.
Thank you. My own contribution. Two questions. One is where you say in the report, reopening the mental health and autism framework. I actually would like you to explain what that means in practice. And secondly, I think the report could have been slightly fuller by comparing waiting times out of county, but I hear what Richard has already said, that we're better than average on that, which is great. If he's got any more information on that, that would be very interesting to hear. I'd like to welcome not just the report, which I do, but lots within it, including how we deal with independence in our home care offer. I think that's absolutely right. I love, like Councillor Van de Vendes, the joined up thinking with the health and wellbeing strategy. I think the fact that you've established an accommodation board is really interesting, and we should support that. And we all know, not just in this committee, but across the council, the opportunity, and also the imperative to redevelop our own sites. And I agree with what Councillor Slatter said and others, that we should maximise that going forward. If I was to make some constructive criticisms, as you've said yourselves in the presentation, years 3 to 10 haven't got enough houses, right? That's in straight terms, that's what we're talking about here. Market shaping is the jargon word that they all use, right? And that we're forced to use. I know, right? Market shaping for me, it's not enough just to say we want things and to hope the market will respond, right? And so when you bring the paper back in June, analysing not just what we want in years 3 to 10, but how we realistically believe that can be achieved. That's my definition of market shaping, that we have. It's about doing more than just saying it, right? That's probably unfair to our officers, so but I make the point. Like Councillor Bowden, it's good to highlight working age adults, but I just want to say this about elderly people. We know that across the county, there's not enough suitable housing close to home for people as they become more disabled. And so what they're doing is they're either carrying on living in unsuitable homes, or they're being forced to move farther away from their neighbours and friends, and sometimes relatives. And I think that has to be part of our strategy. We need to get better accommodation for elderly people closer to home, as well as to people of working age. And my other two other constructive criticisms. Is the capital available? I think we need, again, in the June paper, the council has got increased pressure on its capital programme, so it wants capital receipts. If independent providers can come in and help us with that, all well and good, but many of us would also like to see the council itself developing schemes, as was our policy. But there are clearly constraints about the availability of capital for that. So that needs to be part of the analysis, and I hope it'll be the mix of both, as is the policy of the council. And I do think we need to formally change our policy about independent living schemes. I've said in this meeting many a time, but our current policy is not working. Why don't we just own up to that? And when we agree the paper in June, formally get rid of the old policy, which isn't working, which doesn't mean we don't go forward with East Cambridgeshire and the Princess of Wales site, but says that we're not going to be rolling this out at one a year, which is what our policy was. Okay, it's not going to happen. The land costs and the construction costs are too high. We get that, but let's formally change the policy and formally have a new policy that we think is going to work when it comes to June. Really good discussion by all members, by the way, as well as by officers. And I invite Richard and Shauna to come back.
This is going to be a test of memory. So please do shout if anyone feels we haven't covered their point, but we'll work through.
Councillor Taylor, I'll start with your question around registered social landlords and the challenges they've had. I think some of those challenges are down to housing adaptations, as well as where children are residing within the family home, and adaptations are required to enable them to stay there. And that is something that's being worked on as part of a separate but connected piece of work, working with the district councils and the housing improvement agencies to look at how we do that. We are working quite closely with children's social care in terms of how we interact with local registered social landlords on new developments. So if we manage to increase our pipeline and generate that accommodation, it can only create more choice on an all-age basis as well as a working age basis, if that makes sense. And I think by taking a more strategic approach to engaging with local registered landlords across the county with a needs assessment that articulates how much we need where, will give us a far more systematic and outcome-based approach that we could then measure the success on and also learn from. This is the first long-term pipeline we will have, and so it's likely that we will need to learn from this process as we develop it and adapt to that feedback and learning as we move through through this journey. Councillor Black, you asked around district housing response. So we have a county-wide housing board where we link in with all of the district councils, and we have really positive conversations there. In terms of our pipeline at the moment, Cambridge City have been particularly proactive in identifying sites and putting those forward, but that doesn't mean the conversations aren't ongoing with other district councils across the piece. Councillor Howell, you asked a question around choice and out of county.
Could I suggest we provide a written response to that? We'll add it to the action log and I'll provide a written response on the choice question that was raised.
Perfect. And Councillor Count, you asked a question around people placed out of county and whether they would become the responsibility of another local authority. Can I suggest we also deliver a written response to that one? There's quite complex ordinary residence arrangements that dictate that, and I won't do it justice right now in a short answer. And then you asked for a rationale about the greater difference in numbers across the county. So our needs assessment at the moment is primarily driven by census information and evidence we contain on our own systems in relation to current need for services, and using population projections, etc., to project that over a number of years. So in a way, it is a projection based on what we know right now, and that could change. But where there are differences, it's because the need is greatest there at the moment, and our census information is telling us that that's either likely to grow or grow at the same rate, if that makes sense. But again, we continuously need to sense check that against what we know. It's a very long-term projection, and so it may or may not play out, but it's what our evidence is showing us at this point in time.
You also asked about savings. I think this, it's capital investment to make a longer term revenue saving, in that there are better outcomes for the people that use that kind of accommodation. There's more chance of step down and move through, going back to the point around employment and other things. The unit price of these kinds of accommodation structures are often cheaper than traditional residential, mainly because in traditional residential, we're obviously picking up the hotel costs as well as the care costs. So to be able to have that supply in county, that's the right supply, not only does it get better outcomes, but it's often more efficient for the council as well. So that would be how we'd build the argument, build the business case for that pipeline all the way through, that's continually doing that in terms of not using residential, but using this specialist accommodation where applicable.
Councillor Murphy, thank you so much for your feedback around the what could be perceived as inward-looking nature of the report, and I think that is a really helpful and valid point, and it's something that we can link with our regional ADAS colleagues on across the region and see whether there's anything we could do in linking our strategy to their strategy and how we see the movement of people through that. So thank you.
You're right, and children's one where children's has got a little bit further on that is they do more regional commissioning. Probably because they're even more up against it with children's residential supply, but they do look more regionally than adults have historically, where we've sort of stuck within our boundaries. So I think it's a really good challenge, and it's not something we had in the paper. So thank you.
Perfect. And finally, Councillor Howitt. So the mental health and autism accommodation framework is a framework we have in place at the moment to place people with those needs into accommodation. We commissioned that service a number of years ago now, and there's a small number of providers sitting on the framework. The benefits of a framework is that we can reopen it on a regular basis, intervene in the market, as you say, and do the work to generate an interest, explain what our need is. And so that has recently reopened, and we've had a huge response, having intervened and had those conversations with local providers so they understand what we want, what we need, and what our expectations are. And we're currently going through the process of evaluating those at the moment.
Comparing waiting times out of county is an interesting one, and one I need to take away and have a look at. I don't have it here, but it's a good. My guess is obviously it's longer because usually we've looked internally, we couldn't find anything, then we've started to look externally. Usually we place out of county where there's really high levels of complexity and supply is difficult, which is why this paper's here. So I suspect the waiting times are longer, but let me go away and get back to you on the exact data.
And then just coming to your point about older age adults, our strategy that we've got as part of the accommodation board covers all age. So we've homed in for the purposes of discussion around the area of greatest need today, but just to give you some reassurance that our strategy covers all ages, and we are projecting demand on an all age basis and looking to take a longer term approach across working age and older adults.
The last one's on capital. Is it available? Yes, but it's always hard won, which is another good reason to bring this paper and have the committee sort of champion the work. And it's hard won because the council's got to be very sure we've got a really good business case, and it's a bit chicken and egg sometimes to get that business case together with it. But we already have that 12 million set aside to support this, which will be certainly enough to kick us off and get us started, especially if we can work with registered providers, because our capital will go further. So that could be quite an exciting route. So yes, we would always want more, but we've got enough to get started.
Okay, I'm not going to sum up myself on this. All I'm going to do is to thank Richard and Shauna and to thank all members, and whispering with Patrick. I'm sure there'll be a very full minute of this from Richenda. We'll then reflect how we ensure that all the points are picked up and use it to steer the next stage. So we'll do that outside the meeting, and that is just to reassure members that of the value of your contributions. 30 seconds, Councillor Bowden.
Much less. May we ensure, please, Chair, that the written responses which have been offered to us will come to all members of the committee?
They will, says Patrick, and they'll also go on the action log. So I'm sorry, I'm going to drive this on. I'm really sorry, but I am going to. So we have the recommendations to scrutinise the contents of the report and to support the development of principles and next steps to expanding accommodation to meeting the current and future shortfall in accommodation for working age adults with complex needs. Nod at me if you're happy with that, and I'll just check there is a consensus. Yes, that's all around the table, so that is agreed by acclamation. We now move to the two items which are contract extensions. Officers, can you do a maximum of 2 minutes in presentation each, and then obviously we'll see where the questions come, but if you introduce them very concisely to help us catch up with a bit of time, please. And the first one is homelessness and housing related support, pages 45 to 58 of the agenda papers, and Lisa Sparks maybe is joining Shauna and Richard at the table. And obviously present in the order you choose.
I'll just kick off because I know we're tight for time. There's something similar about both these reports. As you say, they are both contract extensions. They're both 7-year contracts, and both of them have reached their first break clause. They're both 3 years in, so they were only relatively recently recommissioned. But we put break clauses into contracts for a very deliberate reason, so we've got a chance to discuss, a chance to see where they're at. But as I say, they're both halfway through to both 7-year contracts. I'm going to hand over to Shauna to do a quick intro, and we'll try and keep it tight.
So this report covers, gives the committee an overview of the council's contribution to the system-wide delivery of support for adults experiencing homelessness. The number of people presenting as homeless continues to rise across the country, and Cambridgeshire is also experiencing the impact of this, with more people contacting services for support with more increasingly complex needs. The housing-related support services commissioned by the council play an integral part of the local system-wide preventative offer for those experiencing homelessness and have been developed in partnership with people with lived experience. These contracts are complemented by an in-house county-wide housing first service which seeks to support those with the most complex
Sorry, you are
needs.
going through the report. I did ask you to present it concisely. Could you just come to the key conclusions or recommendations, please?
So the recommendation is to extend these contracts on the basis of the benefits set out of the report for the next 2 years.
Thank you. No discourtesy meant, but if there are questions, that will give you an opportunity to hear where any member concerns are. Or questions, doesn't have to be a concern. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. It's a slightly strange paper, this, because we're being asked for a contract extension, and I have no problem with that. But also, we're given quite a lot of background information, which I think is also can be the subject of very useful debate and discussion. The first thing I'd just like to confirm is the executive summary does say that we're talking here about housing-related support, which is for those with often complex support needs. And I just want to confirm that we're not talking here about housing-related support being generally available in terms of homelessness, but only where there is a social care need over and above the ordinary homelessness need, because at some points in the report it's less specific. The second thing is that I'm quite certain I'm not the only councillor who deals with homelessness issues and who finds that those are the most important individual case work issues that they deal with. I probably end up getting too emotionally involved with some of the cases. I imagine many other councillors are the same. So I do feel very strongly about the issue. And I just wonder how we can ensure that the county councils' housing-related support is obtained where appropriate in individual cases where we don't believe that that has actually been engaged. So what is the mechanism that we can use to get housing revenues, housing-related support engaged in individual cases? And the third point I've got to make, in paragraph 2.4, we talk about the interrelationship between what we as the county council are doing and what our district councils do in terms of their statutory obligations as far as homelessness is concerned. And mention is also made in the report of charitable providers, one of which is mentioned there is the Ferry Project. And I think it's really important that we recognise that charitable providers do a tremendously good job, of course, but not all charitable providers are registered providers. And that creates significant difficulties when it comes to local district councils or the city council being able to offer cost-effective support, again, talking about housing benefit recovery. So we've got that with the Ferry Project, which is not a registered provider, and I hope that by next month, finally, a relationship will exist between the Ferry Project and the YMCA, which is a registered provider, so that housing benefit monies can be recovered. But it's really important, if we're working in partnership with our district councils and with the city council, it's really important that we recognise that charitable providers and other providers which are not, if they're not registered providers, it actually creates significant pressure for the city and district council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for all of that. Councillor Boulat, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think like many other councillors, I had the opportunity to see directly some of the work the providers are doing in this space, including Jimmy's in Cambridge on Newmarket Road, which is in my division. So it's really good to see the good work being done in this space. My question is around the trauma-informed approach, because on 3.1, it does say that the Services Commission in 2022 adopted the new co-produced model, including this trauma-informed approach. And considering that in the last full council, Councillor Goodleaf's motion passed the motion for a trauma-informed council. I was wondering, first of all, how did this approach work so far, and what else can we do in the light of our work towards a trauma-informed county to expand on this approach in those services? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howell, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question. With regards to these contracts, do we have any concern at all about the standard of care or anything like that that's going in? I don't think, but they may well be CQC registered, so anything at all that we should be aware of?
Thank you very much. Councillor Seif.
Thank you, Chair. It's a little bit more background, I think, than anything else. As I understand it, these contracts, the extensions are on a like-for-like basis, so are not taking into account inflationary pressures, which may increase the actual monetary value. So presumably dealing with the same number of cases as you have at the moment. I think Councillor Bowden referred to the complex cases, and he wanted to know whether it's just about those. But my question is, with demand rising, which you obviously note in the report, how do we contain the demand, as it were, to within the contract? Is it sufficient? And again, this is, as you've indicated, a national problem. If we're giving good care for homeless, other counties may not be able to provide such care. People will drift in here. So is it only people who are actually residents or would normally be residents of Cambridgeshire? How do we contain it and make sure that we are engaging with all those who have that need and within the confines of that contract?
Thank you. Councillor Van de Ven.
Thanks. May I ask a cheeky question, partly to you, Councillor? I know I'm not supposed to ask a question of another member, but I'll ask the report providers. Under third-party contributions per annum, I noticed Cambridge City Council and Public Health. I'm curious if there's a possibility of Fenland District Council contributing, but I'm just curious because there it is on the papers. Or if you could clarify what it looks like there. Is that okay?
If a member wants to come back on this occasion, I would allow him to do so, but only if he wants to. I will, though, take Councillor Count next.
Thank you, Chair. On the report on page, on the report, it mentions that a new cost-benefit analysis is being developed. The actual contract was 3 + 2 + 2 in terms of years. So the first 5 years are included and finishing 25, and then we're being asked the next 2 years. I couldn't find anywhere in the report where it said the cost and benefit analysis of what's already been undertaken has gone through, and it says a new one is being developed. Are we seriously saying that for 5 years there's been no cost benefit analysis and purely outcome based on the individual, which are the stories we get at the back? If there wasn't a cost benefit analysis, why wasn't there one for the earlier years? And if there was, what are the actual outcomes from that? Because I can't find them. Thank you.
And one from me. The decision to move away from hostel-based accommodation alone as the main model was taken in 2020. It is the end of 2024. And I looked down the names on the list and I recognised a lot of them. And I just wonder how far provision has actually changed following that decision. And so that's my question. Richard, Shauna, and Lisa.
So I'll work through, there's quite a number of questions there. So again, please shout if we miss anything. Councillor Bowden, I think the services are targeted at where there is a homelessness need. So there's a pathway that we've developed with the district councils, and it's a single point of access within that district to these services. So where people enter that pathway and are taken through the accommodation approach, these services wrap around that approach to ensure that there's support to deliver, to ensure that help that person achieve better outcomes at the end of that temporary accommodation process. And I'll ask Lisa to come in with any more details around that and the individual cases.
So yes, so the housing related support services that we're commissioning work.
And can you just get the microphone
Sorry,
closer
is
to your
that
mouth?
better?
Yep.
Okay. So the services that we're commissioning do work closely with the other system partners in the area. So there's a clear understanding of the criteria to get into those services. So they are very much targeted at those people with quite complex needs behind the homelessness. The normal statutory homelessness route remains with the districts, and probably 90% plus people will just follow through that route. This is the people for whom there are issues with drug and alcohol, mental health, repeat homelessness, rough sleeping. Those are the people that are being supported by these services predominantly. So the people for whom a quick fix through temporary accommodation wouldn't need they need that additional support to address needs and move forward. And that will be picked up through rough sleeper partnerships, through district council housing teams, multi-agency meetings to make sure that the services are targeted at the right people.
Ensure that HRS is obtaining in individual cases and the housing benefit. Okay, we're going to dot around a bit just while we coordinate ourselves. Councillor Howe, we don't have any concerns around the quality of care being delivered there at the moment. We have regular contract monitoring and management meetings, and we are they're achieving good outcomes. In Councillor Seath, in terms of the extension, we do have an inflationary process that runs across all of our services that feeds into our business planning process, but that it is being it's being extended on a like-for-like basis, subject to those negotiations on an annual basis, happening, going through governance and approval processes. In terms of how we contain and ensure we only meet the needs of those, I'll bring Lisa in.
So obviously the services that we are commissioning here are part of a wider system. So for example, Jimmy's provide a number of additional services, as do the ferry project and Riverside, that don't fall within our contracts. So a lot of the organisations that we're working with within those contracts are also using their charitable means to plug other gaps. And then that helps them to respond to surges in demand. They also work with the various district councils around accessing things like housing prevention grant, and also money through the rough sleeper funding bids when those are coming up. And as a county, we're having conversations about what might be needed for future bids that would include the Housing First service and also the other services that the district councils provide to support these individuals. With regards to the trauma-informed approach, the feedback that we're getting is that it's working very well. When the contracts commenced, there was a lot of work within those contracts to ensure that all staff were actually formally trained in that approach and to share good practice. So it's something that we are monitoring, but we do get good feedback from individuals as well about how the services have adapted and how that approach works better for them on the ground. So it's still sort of early days, but that's one of the things that has been introduced across all of the adults contracts and the homelessness young people's contracts as well.
And Councillor Count, just coming on to the cost benefit analysis tool. So we do work with the service at the moment to understand value for money, outcomes for individuals, and the utilisation and all the kind of standard pieces that we would usually do around a contract to ensure ourselves that we're obtaining value for money as an organisation. What we are trying to do is draw on some best practice that has been developed in Manchester, and it's some more sophisticated modelling around the preventative impacts of these services on the public purse. So that may be some impact to the county council, there may be some NHS benefits to that, and there could be some social value impact. So it's taking the work we do at the moment and taking it to another level so that we can, acknowledging there's an increase in demand in this area, so that we can really evidence the benefit and the value of that both now and moving forward into the future as we start to tackle that increase in demand and show what impact it's having in the here and now. Councillor Bowden, you asked a question, and I apologise, I'm just going to sense check that I've got the right thing written down. You asked how individual cases would access housing related support services, and I'll just bring Lisa in.
As in the individuals themselves?
If I may, Chair, how we as councillors, when we're dealing with a homelessness case as part of our casework, how we can ensure that the appropriate housing related support is available to the individuals.
Okay. So within the contracts, there will be a pathway in. People will be able to apply to those services. So where they meet the criteria, then a referral can go through, and usually those services will then liaise directly with the individual. Quite often people are accessing the services through things like rough sleeper coordinators and through the district housing teams. All of the district councils will have contact details for those contracts as well and know how to make referrals into the various services, so they would be able to assist.
And I think that has covered off all of the questions on my list, but please do flag if I've missed anything.
I didn't hear my word answered, but you can tell me outside the meeting because I am going to move this on, and I'm setting an example by saying that. The recommendations, thank you very much to Lisa, Shauna and Richard. The recommendations are A, to note the County Council's contribution to investing in a system-based approach to delivering support services to address the needs of those who are experiencing homelessness and how this positively impacts that group of people. To B, approve a 2-year extension to the existing contract in line with current terms and conditions at a total value of 4.6 million. That's 2.3 million per annum from the 1st of April 2025. Value will be adjusted for inflation, awarded at the Council's discretion and agreed through business planning. And C, delegate authority to award contract extensions to the Executive Director in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee. I haven't heard objections, so can I just say, nod at me if you are generally happy, and let's see if there is a consensus. I am seeing nods all around the table. So that is agreed by acclamation. Thank you again to officers. We move straight again to the second contract extension, item 6, extra care. Again, about 2 minutes in presentation, and we'll see where the questions take us.
Fab. So we're here today to seek 2 housing scheme. The first extension request relates to 4 schemes: Bed Lodge, Eden Place, Millbrook House and Nest Court, and the second request relates to Ditchburn Place. The table at 2.5 provides a detail of the 18 extra care schemes, and throughout the lifetime of the extensions of these contracts will be regularly monitored, and we are updating contract monitoring arrangements at the moment to ensure we improve on that.
Thank you very much. Who would like to come in on this? Councillor Black.
Thanks very much, Chair. And first thing I'd like to sort of look at on this is I've been reading paragraph 3.4.1 on Ditchburn Place, and I think it makes very sad reading. And okay, this is in the past here, but we've got a situation where what stuff that was done by Cambridge City Council was bid for, and there were no bids, and it says on the grounds that the financial risk with the high levels of local authority pay. And so you end up with a failed tendering, but even then there's a secret decision, which I think is what confidential means here, to just directly award the contract to a private company. And what really concerns me and what we get next in this is we're talking about harmonisation of pay. Now, could you clarify to me, are we talking about we're requiring the private company or whoever wins this bid to harmonise towards the decent rates that used to be provided by local authorities, or are we saying that harmonisation should mean that those people who are still there since 2019 should be looking to see their pay and their terms and conditions deteriorate towards the sort of pay that private companies and the terms and conditions that private companies like? Because I mean, I suppose the question is, how do we get out of this death spiral where we find that the workers who we rely on in these sort of scenarios lose out and get less respect, worse pay and conditions, and what's inserted is where, with the city council, there presumably was no element of private profit. We're having to find the money for private profit instead of pay for the workers who are doing the actual work in this. I'm sorry, I don't think you're going to be able to solve this, but you feel so powerless on this Adults and Health Committee, in that I wanted to see this council turning things around, and we seem to have a system which is driving us to make things worse, and I really don't like that. So, yeah, horrible situation it feels to me that we're on in this committee, and we need things to change on a national level, possibly, to totally change the direction of travel we've got here, because it saddens me, and I think it's one of the awful things that's happening in social care at the moment, and that we need to change 15 years of not caring about this and to care. Can I just go on to Summers Court? What's happened with Summers Court? Was there not some sort of plan that provision should be replaced by better provision, and that there was investment and some sort of new facility coming on? So what's happened to that facility? Where was the money going to come from, and why isn't it coming to make that happen now? Because that seems to be a problem here. And finally, I just want to draw our attention to at the end of paragraph 4.1, and it applies a little bit to the previous item as well. I didn't speak on this, but again, we've got consideration of setting up an in-house service. And time again, I keep seeing a paragraph like this that almost seems in the same words. And I think we have a joint administration policy that we should be bringing things in-house. And time again, we get a paragraph that says we're not bringing things in-house. It mentions Red Quadrant here, saying that we need to address recommendations around the delivery of current in-house services before considering. Well, we have a bad situation with the delivering of services privately. And I think we need to address that situation as a matter of urgency and look to replace it with something better. Because if the situation is that a diversity of provision, including third sector organisations, charities and so on, and in-house situations, is being replaced time and time again by a large national profit-making company, it seems to me we are totally out of control of what's happening here, and that we need to get into control and make the administration's policy of making things better through not having money wasted on profit, but going through an in-house provision. We need to make that a reality. And I just keep seeing this paragraph, not just in this report, in others, and it worries me. Are we really going to turn things around? Thanks.
Thank you. Apologies to Councillor Slatter. I couldn't fit you into the last round, so I'm bringing you in early in this round. Councillor Slatter.
Well, I'm actually on Councillor Black's coattails, because I was going to raise the issue of Ditchburn Place. When I was on the City Council, we were very proud of how this site was repurposed from maternity ward. I'd been one of its last customers, to a multi-purpose supported housing. And I'm very sorry to see it is hitting problems. It may be over to us to be dealing with our City Councillor colleagues, as well as officers having to wrestle with these issues. But when we say that the number of TUPE staff remains significant, I read that as continuity, but maybe somebody could explain just what that means, because I may be misunderstanding that, but having the same staff carrying on seems like quite a good thing, and I'm aware of one or two of them we would not want to lose. So I just want to make sure I'm interpreting the problem properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Bowden, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. It goes back to the point that Councillor Black was making about Summers Court in Wisbech. And again, for full transparency, Fenland Future Limited, which is referred to in the report as providing the replacement extra care development, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Fenland District Council. It was quite a shock 3 months ago when Housing 21 told us that this particular site was going to be closed and closed on the 31st of March 2025. It had been hoped that they would continue to operate the site until the new extra care development being developed by Fenland Future Limited at Neen Riverside in Wisbech came on board. That unfortunately hasn't happened. What was particularly unfortunate, Chair, was that Housing 21 did communicate with the residents initially to say that if they found themselves homeless as a result, they needed to apply to Fenland District Council. And it's taken some coordination between Fenland District Council and the County Council to try to ensure that correct pathways are found for each individual concerned so that their housing needs are going to be met after the 31st of March. The last I heard when I made inquiries about this, I was told that that is ongoing and will be successful. I would just like some confirmation that as far as the County Council is concerned, it is seen as being on target to ensure that everyone who's currently in Summers Court does have access or will have access by the 31st of March to suitable accommodation, even if it is only temporarily before the Neen Riverside site does become available in what's probably 2 or 3 years' time. As far as the rest of the report concerned, I'm really ever so supportive of extra care developments. It's one of the reasons why I've pushed for the new extra care development to be used on what was our land. We sold it to Fenland Future Limited, but to make sure that there was specific allocation made within Wisbech at a suitable site so that extra care could be provided. And the more extra care provision that we have across the county, the better as far as I'm concerned. It is a very, very good investment, both from the County Council's point of view and from the point of view of the individuals who are in the individual locations. I've got one particular one mentioned again in this report in my own division, Willow Court, absolutely and utterly superb. And some of these examples that we've got in front of us are really good quality, first-class accommodation projects, and I just hope we see more of them.
Thank you very much. Councillor Van der Ven.
Thank you. I know the paper is really just about a break clause on a contract that was awarded in the previous administration, so it's a very technical point. But as you said, colleague said, there's an opportunity to explore some other important issues. And I think just on the subject of in-house provision, I think what we're really after in the big picture is best provision for residents, and it needs to come in all sorts of forms. And we always consider what all the best options are. I guess what's on my mind is the outstanding work of Care Together and the development of the Care micro enterprises, which are not in-house actually. What's wonderful there is that they are local, that they are really embedded in the community. And I think working locally is certainly one of our aspirations as an administration. And I think it's something we all share across the council. I see Councillor Bowden nodding at me. We're all local champions, and we know that we can do really well for people if we work locally. So I just wanted to put that out there.
This is not a general debate about insourcing. So I will just say Richard Hills has already told me there's going to be a report to the March committee on this. So we look forward to that, and that will give people a chance to debate that. But just to underline what Councillor Van der Ven just said, we want the best provision, and the best provision is by genuinely evaluating and bringing forward proposals for in-house provision, for voluntary and community sector provision, for private provision, including micro enterprises in the examples that she's given. And it's not favouring any one particular sector. And the policy of the administration is that one particular sector has been favoured in the past and we've changed it. And that's what we'll scrutinise with the paper in March. Lots of questions again. Over to officers to respond.
Yes, on the first question, which is difficult to answer, but I think I would go back to that point Councillor Howart's just made, which is we are looking always for best provision. There is plentiful supply of extra care housing in the market. I think we've got evidence that it's good. I think of these 5 providers we're looking to extend, 4 of them are rated good. One of them's required improvement, but that was back in 2020. And the QA team have done a lot of work with them, and we're confident when the next CQC inspection comes, they would also get a good. I think the other point comes in that Cambridgeshire County Council have consistently championed good price for care workers, and I think we can confirm that over 90% of our providers have confirmed back to us that they are paying the real living wage. We do put all our services through Care Cubed, which is a national pricing tool to make sure that we are paying a fair cost of care. It's very important to the administration, I know, and it's very important to commissioners that the market is sustainable. Under the Care Act, we must secure sustainable supply, so that's incredibly important. And you can see from the paper that Ditchburn quality service, though it is coming out quite a lot more expensive than the other providers, all of which rated good, and so there is a need within our limited resources to make sure we secure quality market supply at a fair cost across the market. And that's where the harmonisation comes in. That's kind of the position we're in at the moment. So that's what I'd say on that first one. In terms of, I'll hand over to you for Summers Court.
So in terms of Summers Court, we are on track to make sure that everybody will be accommodated in alternative accommodation by the end of March. All of the care assessments have been done by the adult social care team. Fenland District Council, Clarion, who manage the housing on their behalf, Housing 21 and the county are all working together to facilitate people's preferences. Fenland District Council have ensured that everyone has emergency housing status to make sure that when they're bidding, they get to the top of the list. We've already found accommodation for 12 individuals in either extra care housing or within registered residential care, as some people's needs had obviously increased during the period they were in the property. Everyone else is on HomeLink now so that they can actually bid for social housing properties, and a number of individuals are looking at sheltered housing within the Fenland area and particularly within the Wisbech area. Housing 21 are also trying to ensure that they reserve any vacancies in other local projects for those individuals to have sort of first choice on.
Is that all the questions? Yeah. Someone nod at me.
Only the one on the comment on Care Together, which is absolutely right in terms of the more we can co-produce these services, and I know the committee is very keen on that. We're already showing that we're getting better bang for our buck and better outcomes for people. In terms of recent day opportunities, we've been able to get more places because we've co-produced for exactly the same price, and it's more choice for people, and it's a better range of services for people. So that will continue as well with all these services. I mean, we're as I say, 3 years into these contracts. They're quite early contracts, but we will always look to co-produce as we redesign services and look to improve them, because I think you're right. That's how we're going to get better services and keep progressing.
And just to say that Extra Care is also interacting with Care Together, and they are residents in Extra Care are well aware of the schemes and accessing the schemes that Care Together are creating within the community. So there is an overlap there.
Okay, so in summing up, I'll just say this. I don't want to make any general points about the rates of pay, but the agreement to harmonise care rates at Ditchburn Place was prior to this administration, and I want to make quite clear on behalf of the members, our policy is to fully respect 2P, And if there's any question of harmonisation, it should be upwards for other staff to make sure that TUPE rates are matched. That's the policy of this administration. Having said that, I will put the recommendations to the committee, which are A, to approve a 2-year contract extension from the 1st of April at a value of £1.7 million, £831,000 per annum for Ditchburn Place, adjusted for inflationary uplifts and awarding at the council's discretion. And the comments I've just made clarify the remainder of that recommendation. B is to approve a 3-year contract extension from the 1st of April 2025 at a value of £3.6 million. That's £1.2 million per annum for Baird Lodge, Eden Place, Millbrook House and Nest Court. Baird Lodge et al., which will be adjusted for inflation and awarded at council's discretion. And to C, to delegate the authority to award the subsequent extension periods and contract variations on both contracts to the Executive Director Adults Health and Commissioning in conjunction with the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee. I'm going to look for nods and see if I've got them. Looking to my left, do I see nods? I apologise there. I've just read out the record. Thank you for telling me. I read out the recommendations there with one clarification, which are on the in the papers. Can I just check? I saw lots of nods to my right. I want to see if I'm getting nods to my left. I am. Okay, so that's agreed by acclamation. We now move on to the business planning audit. Sarah By and Caroline Townsend are going to come to the table. Sarah is Head of Performance Strategic Development. Caroline is Head of Programme Commissioning and Partnerships. And you've been listening carefully to the previous discussions, so you know that I'm going to be asking for a very concise presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. The report before you today was on account of a referral from the Audit and Accounts Committee, which was held in October at the request of the Executive Director for Adults Health and Commissioning. An internal audit was conducted of the 24-25 business planning process across the Directorate. 6 recommended actions were highlighted by the audit, and the report outlines how we have addressed these to develop and improve our processes to provide assurance in the 25-26 business planning process. Happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. Councillor Seif.
Thank you, Chair. I sit on the Audit Accounts Committee, so I guess it as does. Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry. Yeah.
Move the actual machine, because you want to look that direction.
Well, I do want to look that way.
Yeah, so move the whole machine to your left.
There we go. You'll be able to hear me now.
Marvellous.
Okay. Yes, sit on the Audit Accounts Committee, and I have read the audit report in some detail, as I'm sure Councillor Bowden has done as well. I'm sure we all have now, because we have a copy of it. It's quite disturbing in some ways, in fact, in many ways. In the committee, we often talk about the concepts of what audit group, the internal audit group, which incidentally we praised to high heaven at the General Council meeting.
You need to move the microphone. Microphone to your left.
But we do discuss what limited compliance means, or limited assurance on governance means, and it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. And of course, obviously, the particular issue here, the impact on the organisation, which you've assessed as minor. Now, I can see that a lot of the recommendations that have been made are being implemented, or have already been implemented. I won't go through all the detail. I've actually marked it up, but we can do that in a moment if we need to. I was a bit surprised about the minor assessment on the organisation. And I suppose, because there's quite a lot of money that is involved here in terms of savings. So the key question I would like to ask, summing it all up, is, are you still confident? Is the department still confident that the targeted savings can still be achieved once these recommendations have been implemented? I'm assuming that, and I believe this is the case, that all recommendations were accepted by the department. So that's quite an important point. And I know the way these things work, and there's a discussion before the audit report is presented. But for me, the key question is, are we still on target to achieve those savings? Is that really, can we call that a minor impact rather than something more serious? Because it would have a major impact. I think £10 million in the context of the overall spending is not material, perhaps, but it is a significant sum, and in particularly in the context of this particular objective. So, thank you.
Thank you. And Justine Hartley is already in the room and listening, so she may want to pick that up. They could decide between them who's the best to answer that. So, as you say, also a member of the Audits and Accounts Committee, Councillor Bowden.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I won't repeat the comments made by Councillor Seif, but I concur with them all. And one of the things which was very concerning was the detail of the internal audit report that we had in front of us. And that detail hasn't been reproduced here, and some of it is not in the public domain, nor should it be, nor need it be. What's really important here is that it's quite clear that appropriate actions have been taken or are being taken in relation to the 6 particular recommendations that came from Audit and Accounts, particularly the 3 which were deemed to be of the highest priority. So I'm extremely grateful to see that, and I very much welcome it. I also welcome the fact that this item is on the agenda today, because it is in the Constitution that if the Audit and Accounts Committee is concerned about something, they can refer it back to the relevant service committee. And you, Chair, have ensured that it's the first possible opportunity for this coming before the committee. I would contrast that with another committee, but I better not mention anything about children and young people. I've said enough about that this week already. So I'm quite happy about this in terms of the direction of travel. As far as the business planning is concerned, it's quite appropriate for us to learn from 24-25. We have clearly been learning from 24-25 and moving on to 25-26 to ensure that some of the errors that were made, some of the failings that there were, some of the lack of assurance that we had is being addressed. One of the things, though, which happened in the 24-25 business planning area, which I'm not convinced we've managed properly to address, relates to demand estimates. Now, particularly if we're talking about residential care, where you're talking for an individual about costs which may be 100,000, 150,000 a year, whether you're talking about older people's residential care or you're talking about residential care for someone with learning disabilities, for example. Demand estimates are absolutely crucial in the business planning process. And for 24-25, we got our demand estimates quite wrong. We overestimated. Now, I'm not for 1 second seeking to complain about the individuals who made those estimates. They did it on the best information they had available, working on the trends they thought they saw were happening. And I would have done no better than they, well, I'd have done a lot worse than they did, I'm sure. So I'm not for 1 second trying to criticize the work that they did. What concerns me is 2 things about demand estimates. The first is we don't seem to have a really good grasp of sensitivity analysis on our demand estimates. And really that needs to be brought into our business planning process. In this case, our demand estimate was an overestimate. When the demand estimate is an underestimate, then that grabs people's attention far more quickly because, of course, you're short of cash as far as the budget is concerned. So I really would encourage, and I see the director is nodding, I really would encourage a lot more consideration to be given to the sensitivity analysis on key numbers, and demand estimates for residential care is really a key number in the business planning that we have for any year. And the second thing I'd like some consideration to be given to is how we deal with the situation as we've had in 24-25, when, as a result of an overestimate, we are considerably under budget. Now, being considerably under budget in a situation such as that is not a bad thing. In a whole host of ways, it's a very good thing. And I had the feeling that there was some reluctance to accept that being under budget because an estimate had been too high was a good thing. And we shouldn't be afraid if we are under budget as a result of an estimate being too high, we shouldn't be afraid just to accept that windfall, for want of a better word, against budget, rather than to feel as though there was something potentially wrong. It looked as though we were not spending the money we should be spending. And I don't feel that that really came across during the course of this year, 24-25. I hope we don't have a massive under or overestimate in our demand estimates again for next year. We could have. It's a very difficult job to do. But if we do find ourselves significantly under budget, and we were under budget by some 8 million, I think is the latest projection for as far as residential care is concerned, overwhelmingly because of the demand estimates being too high for 24-25. If we are in that position, we shouldn't be ashamed of it. We should just be grateful for the unexpected windfall. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. I am needing to speed us up, so I've only got one member showing, who's Councillor Slatter.
Thank you, Chair. This is 3.2.8. I'm homing in on those first 2 bullet points, and I'm a bit concerned, and I don't expect answers now, but I'm a bit concerned that the 1 million increase is a failure on our part to prevent debt mounting up in many cases. And it's related to the second one, where we do need to support people more, perhaps give more debt advice and income maximisation advice, and trying to pay back if they have fallen into debt sooner. And that does probably require plenty of good communication between social workers and those involved in the financial side. These are all individual cases, I appreciate, but I'm most concerned by those 2, especially if young adults are falling into debt and just need better advice early on to prevent the debt. Thank you.
I think that's probably best interpreted as a question to Justine under the Finance Monitoring Report, and I'm sure she's making notes as well. So if Sarah and Caroline don't feel you have to answer everything, do feel free to refer it to Justine if that's more appropriate. I'm allowing Councillor Black to come in very briefly.
Yes, so very briefly then, Chair. I mean, it is nice to be in a financial situation that you think is robust and sustainable, but I do think we should worry and try and look into the reasons for it. I mean, for instance, there might be some deep reasons why we've got an underspend, and they might not be ones that are continuing. I mean, for instance, post-COVID, are people more reluctant to go into residential care? Is that going to continue? What worries me is that we might have inadvertently made cuts, and I think it's right to worry about that rather than just say, whoopee, we've got away with that. I mean, and in particular, are there levels of unmet need that's invisible to us and that somehow slipped off the radar? I think it is right, while rejoicing that we're not in a position that we suddenly have to make cuts because we've overspent. I think it's right to investigate the reasons why our forecasts are out. So, thank you, Chair.
I think it is an important point given our financial situation. I see the points made by Councillor Bowden and Councillor Black as consistent, that we certainly shouldn't be punitive against our own officers if the forecasts aren't right. Absolutely, so I completely agree with that. But if they're not right, to deep dive to try and understand what's behind it, which is in fact what our officers are doing. So I will just place that on record. As I say, feel free to refer some of the questions if that's better done. Sarah.
Yeah, especially if the councillor's asked the wrong question in the wrong place. I do apologise for that. I slipped. Sorry.
Thank you. No problem at all, Councillor Slatter. So just on the first point to Councillor Sleep, the information that was given about the impact being minor is a conclusion that's drawn by the audit team. So that's part of their process and in terms of their definitions of the impact. So it's probably not something that we can really comment on because it's part of their determining the whole process. In terms of the delivery of savings, that is something that we keep a track on. So there is a quarterly tracker and also each project has a governance process around the financial delivery of savings that might be attached to any particular proposals. So that's one of the things that we have improved on this year to make sure that we are really tracking that so that we've got a much better oversight of any shortfall in the delivery of savings. As you know, we are reporting on those regularly. So there'll be elements where we have had the intention in terms of delivery of savings, but things may change during the year, and that's all captured in the quarterly reporting. Justine might want to say something more about how
I am
that's
going to,
reporting.
because I'm hitting the 2 hours. Justina, is it okay if you pick up the answers when you do your own report rather than now? Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Sarah or Caroline?
I'll hand over to Caroline. There's nothing else from me.
I just wanted to confirm that the recommendations that were made by audit, all of those recommendations were accepted and agreed by the Directorate. So just wanted to make that confirmation. And as Sarah mentioned in relation to the minor, that impact, that is very much part of the audit process, but I think that's partially reflective of the approach that was taken in relation to the audit, that it was very much focused on deep diving certain areas and to particular proposals. So I think for those particular proposals, there was not saying that there was, small financial impact, but there was, it wasn't the full, the full savings impact that we were looking at. There was a more limited amount of financial impact relevant to those particular proposals. So that may have well impacted the minor recommendation that came out in relation to organisational impact.
Thank you. The recommendation is that we note the contents of the audit report and remedial actions undertaken. Because we've done that, we actually don't need a vote. Everyone happy? 10 minutes, so we start again at 12:10 on the dot. Okay, I said we'd restart promptly, so we will. Please take your seats at the table, members and executive directors. Out of due respect to Patrick, I will wait till his bum hits the seat, which is now, just like Strictly Come Dancing judges. Right, we move to the finance monitoring report, pages 77 to 120 of the agenda pack. Justine is here. I thought Tom Kelly, Service Director, Finance and Procurement, is also here. And nice to see him at our committee. I see him in other capacities a lot, so it's really nice to see him at this committee as well. And Justine Hardley, Strategic Finance Manager, as ever, will introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is the October Finance Monitoring Report. The headline position is an underspend of 5.388 million, and that continues to reflect the position in older people. We've talked obviously in the previous item about the demand projections, and in particular post-COVID they've been really difficult, and last year we did see some very unusual growth, particularly in our domiciliary care placements, which we haven't seen continue into this year. So we're in difficult times, I think, in terms of forecasting, and thank you to members for their support of the forecasting process. It is always a best estimate, and we will continue to do our best and refine it as we go forwards. Public health forecast underspend of 248,000, and obviously the assumption on that is always it goes to public health reserves at year end. You've got in the report the reserves position, you've also got the savings position. Just picking up on the question in the last item about savings, there obviously are quite a lot of savings in the savings tracker that are still marked as black. And those are ones that need further work in order to develop those, to get those savings delivering through into the future. So I think a lot of the business planning report was about trying to learn from what happened last year and move that forward, so that we don't sit here in a year's time with a similar position, hopefully. So lots of monitoring on that and lots of thinking about it before we get into the year, and sort of using grant funding in an adaptable way to make sure we're ready for the savings that we need to deliver. Tom is here with me today because there's quite a lot of information in the report about debt, and Tom is leading on the deep dive into the debt alongside Kirsten, who's not able to be with us today. So you've got a lot of data in here. Most of it is replicated from the report that went to October Audit and Accounts Committee. But headline-wise, overall debt for adult social care is edging down despite growing revenue levels, which is a really good thing. I particularly draw attention to the graph on page 87, which looks at old debt and how that's moved over time. And we've sort of turned a corner on that as well. So debt to 1 to 2 years has been edging down for some time. The debt over 2 years has been a bit more stubborn. That's now starting to turn a corner. So we're seeing the deep dive actions showing through now in the data. And obviously, the older the debt is, the harder it is to collect. So that's really positive if we can keep those moving down, especially as revenue is going up. I also just wanted to draw your attention to the list of improvements on pages 85 and 86, which I think shows you the really wide extent of the debt deep dive programme. There's a lot of different things going on in there which are feeding into this. We always knew it would take time for the improvements to really kick in, but we're starting to see that now, which is really positive. And the one last thing I wanted to just refer to was the ICB debt position. So in the Audit and Accounts Committee, we knew we were getting a significant payment in October coming through in the ICB debt position. That has been received, and that's reflected now, so that the ICB debt at the end of October was down to 10.6 million from a significantly higher level. So that's positive, and we are working with the ICB on the rest of that debt. So that was all I wanted to say, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Let's take questions. Councillor Van der Ven, please.
Thank you. The question of sustainable forecasting, I think Councillor Black used the word sustainable, robust position in our last item. I just wanted to comment that from what I've learned in this committee, that forecasting adult social care debt is probably harder than, adult social care need is the most difficult forecasting that takes place in this council, the most complex, the most unscientific. And well, sorry, not sorry. Subject to variation, um, and therefore it's a constant fine art. And I really wanted to thank Justine and your team for helping me through these papers every month, and to note how difficult it is, and that I don't think it's a sustainable position each year when there's an underspend or an overspend. I'm aware in behind the headlines on debt, when we're talking about our collaboration or our joint working with other partners in the system, that there are different accounting systems at play against which we need to be working, and how much work there is simply in matching up these systems. And just to note that at a time when we are in an integrated care system, we are meant to collaborate, we have a duty to collaborate, and yet we still have these different systems. So I wanted to acknowledge that aspect of the work that your team also has to do. And to note just how welcome it is that the deep dive work has gone well. That's really good news. And to ask you to speak, if you could, a little bit about the savings tracker and the items of concern there. I'm interested in particular in the first item, which isn't a big deal item. It's the Care Microenterprise. It's not showing savings, but there are some important items further down, which I would welcome hearing a bit more about. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thanks to the officers for this report and the detail within it. There's no point in asking questions about a whole host of things when you're already given the answers. So thank you very much for so many of so much of the information which is given in such a coherent and understandable way. Again, going back to the comment just made by Councillor van der Ven, the demand projections, the forecasts for social care need, particularly as far as residential care is concerned, massively difficult. We can only forecast based on the best information we've got at the moment. And when you've had a disruptive event such as COVID, it's extremely difficult to estimate what the amount of bounce back will be and when any bounce back will occur. Again, I'm not trying to blame the officers for the estimation for this year, but it highlights just how important that one particular figure is. It's the one figure in our budgeting, in our forecasts, which is, I believe, most susceptible to error. When I say error, that the outturn turns out not to be what the expectation was. And I therefore would ask again, particularly that consideration is given to some sensitivity analysis on that, so that we can be, and officers more important, can be aware of the effect of any outturn not reflecting the estimate, whether that's positive or negative. I think that's really important. As far as the debt is concerned, I'm pleased to see the general direction of travel. I know we see an awful lot of work is being done. I'd only pick up really one item more than anything else within that, and that is the fact that, again, we've only had partial payment on the LDP, on the Section 75 agreement, and I'm just concerned about the extent to which the remaining amount of debt may or may not be recoverable. This may not be something you'd want to say in public, but it is something which I think one way or another, we need to be made aware of if and when it's considered that some element of that debt is irrecoverable. As long as we are involved in active and robust negotiations with our partners, as long as we're in such a negotiation, of course, it's inappropriate for us to say that we don't believe that we should be receiving 100% of the debt. But I do worry that we may end up with a significant number there. And one way or another, I think that we need to keep our eye on this, even if officers can only say a certain amount in public at this time. The public health underspend was expected. I think it was known as soon as the budget was produced last year, we were going to have an underspend this year for all the reasons which normally happen to do with public health and the difficulty of making all of the programs being carried forward 100% as we agreed. Year on year on year, we have public health underspends because of that, and I should anticipate that we're going to have underspends because they're the same reasons all the time, primarily to do with staffing and the availability of individuals to do the work we budget for. Given that, we have greater flexibility, Chair, than has been taken in the past about utilising potential underspends in order to have additional spending out of the public health reserve. And my final question, Chair, is just to ask, again, going back to audit and accounts and information which has come from audit and accounts before, how are we doing with open book accounting on some of our major contracts? And is the open book accounting now in operation more effectively than it was in the past with our service partners? And is it producing results in terms of savings and of recovery of monies overspent? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. For other members, you have a right to speak for up to 5 minutes, but I urge you to limit your contributions to about 2 if possible. Councillor Seif.
Thank you. I will be brief, Chairman, partly because I'm going to reiterate a point I made previously, and my colleagues have also made these points. But just to make the obvious point about the estimation for older people services, at any rate, we may not have correctly forecast when that spend will occur, but older people get older and they're likely to need the care at some time in the future. So we can't take this money and spend it. It's going to come back to us at some time in the future. So we shouldn't necessarily pat ourselves on the back and say we've got a saving. That may therefore have hidden what might otherwise have been savings that we had budgeted for. And I think you made the point that there are still some areas which you are examining and they're not quite crystallized. And I agree with Councillor van der Ven. It would be very useful to have a note of those. In the audit report, one of the criticisms was that the means of getting to those savings hadn't been specified clearly. And I reiterate the question I asked before. I mean, is that something? I mean, the organizational changes are taking place and being implemented. But when you get down to the granular detail of individual targeted savings, have they been fleshed out? And can we be confident that they will be realized? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair, and it very much follows in line with what Councillor Seif was saying. What concerns me is we have the table of the savings tracker, and there are, as was reported in the briefing, there's an awful lot of black in there. And black, we have the blue, red, amber, green, black categories, and then in this council, black means unachievable. So we heard earlier on that you're doing more work in order to achieve them, but for the terms of the year 23-24, a black means none of it will be achieved this year, 100% will go missing, and it can only be, they will only be potentially delivered in future years. Now, I know when we saw many of these put forward in the business plan last year, the fact that a lot of them had nice round numbers at the end, 400,000, 300,000, said to us at the time, we said they're aspirational, there's no detail behind these, and it turns out we've been proved correctly. So if these are to be repeated in next year's business plan, or this joint administration's business plan moving forward, we do hope that actually there'll be some detail behind them, which Councillor Seif was referring to actually give you some confidence that they may be achieved. The worrying thing here is, of course, the fact that you've had such a major underspend due to predictions, which we've heard about being wrong, that it's papered over the cracks. And it worries me that people may or may not have taken their eye off the ball because it's okay, we're covered in other areas. And that's extremely concerning. So like I said, I'd like to see more detail if they're going to be represented in the future year's business plan. The other thing I'd like to see is, I was surprised, having looked at the tracker, that I couldn't see an overall box a cumulative box inside the report. So it's normal, in my opinion, if you have these categories to have, first of all, the percentage of the total of savings for each category, and then the actual number of pounds that were missed. And just sitting here and looking at that, I haven't got my calculator out, I'm thinking that maybe 30%, 40% of all the track savings are in black, unachievable. And that is extremely scary if that's correct. So for future reports, could we have a totalizer table, unless I've missed it, and also in the business plan, could we have more details if they're going to be reproduced? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton.
Thank you. Two succinct questions, Chair, you'll be pleased to hear. One is, how much is the debt collection work costing us in terms of human resources? And the second relates to the Court of Protection and probate. I mean, this county is obviously having difficulties in both those areas. I suppose that those difficulties are nationwide, and are we talking to neighbouring or partner councils about those problems?
Thank you. My own contribution. Firstly, on savings, I think a lot has been said that I agree with. It is quite clear that some of the savings that are in there are unattainable. As I understand it, this is a corporate problem, and that changes have taken place at the corporate level to make sure in all committees that where savings are put forward, that they are realisable, and that this isn't specifically an issue just for our committee and our directorate. And clearly, as I think has been rightly said in the debate, when we come to business planning this year, we should be scrutinising hard how far the savings put forward are attainable. And a reminder that our January meeting, almost all of the morning session is just on business planning and our chance to scrutinise. So I look forward to members having the opportunity to do that then. Secondly, on debt, thanks to Tom for coming along and for all the work that's been done. I'm going to suggest to the committee we respect what Councillor Bowden said about not answering publicly what the current state of play is with the ICBA over the Learning Disabilities Partnership. So feel free not to answer that question, officers. I'm in discussion with our officers about a time when we can talk publicly, and of course that's say something more publicly, and of course that's not just about the financial elements, it's also about the service implications. And so I can just want to assure members of the committee that we are in discussion about saying something more about that publicly, including making sure everyone here is up to date, and I'll commit to making sure at the next spokes meeting there's a full and open discussion about that, in which Councillor Bowden on behalf of the opposition will be able to be fully updated. The final point is this: so much of this report reflects genuinely the time and effort our officers are making on savings and on debt diminution, and of course we support that, of course we do, but it sometimes worries me that we are trapped in a culture where so much is about financial strictures that we're not giving the same and the right emphasis on service delivery and quality. It worries me, and it's not that our officers individually are not giving that priority, but that the culture and the system is militating against that. And so I do want to place on record, particularly to our finance colleagues, you know, I hope that when we're asking questions, that is as much part of your mind and part of your conversations as the savings that is necessary for us all to make. And I don't apologise for saying that. I think it's important that these things are said, including at this committee. Justine and Tom. Justine.
Okay, that's a very long list of questions. I'm going to try and put them all collectively because I don't think I've got time to work through them one by one. So maybe we'll start with the savings tracker. Councillor van der Ven, maybe I can spend a bit of time with you outside to talk through the detail of all the savings. We probably don't have time. The micro enterprises one, actually, I think now has got a plan for delivery. Some of the other ones further down. Councillor Bowden, you're right that you know, we're talking about that they're black at the moment. Actually, maybe it was Councillor Count said, but anyway, that they're black at the moment, actually, we're not taking that as necessarily that nothing will be delivered this year. It's just that we don't have the plan yet. So we've kind of marked them as black. It's possible that some of them might, but obviously it's December now. So we're getting towards the end of that period. Focusing really hard on making sure we've, got a plan for delivery for next year, because obviously these savings will carry forward into next year. In terms of an overall total, there is one, rather unusually, council account is right at the top. So I'm not surprised you missed it, but it is in there. I think the other thing I just wanted to say on the savings is that councils, we're in a tighter financial position than we've been in perhaps for quite some time. The level of savings in the business plan this year was much higher than it had been in previous years. And so I think the business planning audit is quite helpful to sort of drive forward the things, because we are continuing in those challenging times. We are continuing with needing to make levels of savings. So it's important that we get better systems and monitoring in place going forwards to make sure that we do deliver on those savings, or we've got alternatives coming through where we are not able to do so. So I think the LDP bit maybe we will deal with outside of this meeting. In terms of older people spend and sensitivity analysis, so Councillor Boland's absolutely right that it's difficult to forecast. And perhaps I can do something in terms of the business planning bit that just gives members a little bit more information. I think I did a bit of a briefing note last year in terms of what our demography numbers were based on, to give you a bit more of an insight into that. I can certainly look into that. But it is really hard to do. The other thing we've got, of course, in Cambridgeshire, we've got quite a lot of self-funders, or people who pay for themselves. We've got quite a lot of people who, even if they come through us to arrange their care, pay for themselves, and that makes it extra complicated to work out. The thresholds for eligibility for the values of your house haven't changed in a long time. Those are not our thresholds; those are national thresholds. And so all of those factors play into making it difficult to estimate how much we will spend on the elements of social care that we fund for individuals. What else have I missed? Tom, I don't know whether you wanted to add anything about the debt collection work and how much it was costing. And the other thing I think I'd missed was open book accounting, but I'd suggest maybe that Val should answer that question once Tom's answered on debt, if that's okay, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So just briefly from me, our debt management team, which covers both adult social care and the wider council, costs in the region of £400,000 per year. It's obviously in the context of close to 60 million of adult social care fees and other 100 million of other fees and charges. And we've got increased resource in that area this year, probably surging by a further 100k to reflect some of the turnaround that we need to see and is coming through. Just tracking back very briefly to Councillor Slatter's question, I think that kind of points to the pathway, as is often the case in social care, actually, that if we can get financial assessment right, if we can get social care practice right, and people are forewarned and understand the care fees that are coming through the process, that really helps with collection at the later end. And one of the features we've seen is a big reduction in the financial assessment backlog. I think the young adults issue Councillor Satter points to, that hasn't been a kind of major theme that we've seen or a major problem in the work. But in terms of other areas of practice, we're looking closely at deputyship, particularly where people don't have property and affairs or financial capacity, making sure we get the arrangements right for them to follow closely on behind kind of care and well-being capacity issues, so that people's financial affairs, whether they're managed by the council or relatives, or third parties, they're in good order for the council to collect debt. And then lastly, for me, just to endorse Councillor the Chair's comments, the public finance by its nature, the reason it's interesting and difficult is because it is more than just numbers. These are very difficult decisions allocating scarce resources, and we keenly feel that, as I know members will, throughout the year, and particularly in this business planning period as well.
Thank you, Val. Val, there was a point to pick up. Wake up.
I'm here now.
Thank you. Yes, in terms of open book accounting, we've focused on our high value services, and those are the four main ones. And we've done open book accounting with two of those, and identified savings in one of them. The other two are now in the process of going through that process, working with audit leads here. And with our smaller contracts, we have put in place a more limited open book accounting. So we have a standardized approach now to all our contracts in terms of monitoring the financial spend, which is particularly relevant as providers now report cost pressures.
Thank you. I've got three people who'd like to come back. Can I ask for your forbearance to not do so and to pick up issues with officers outside the meeting, because I am cognizant of the need to do justice to the later items. But as an opposition spokesman, I will allow Councillor Bowden.
I'm really grateful, Chair. It's possible that Val misspoke when she said that there had been savings identified. Did she mean savings or did she mean recoveries?
It was a mixture of both, actually, because the ambition was to obviously ensure that there was any funding that could be recovered, but we also in that process identified savings.
I am going to put this there. In fact, no vote is required. I'm informed. We're asked to just note the contents of the report. No, I'm looking at the wrong note myself. I do apologise. The report recommendations are to note the Adults Health and Commissioning Finance Monitoring Report as of the end of October 2024 and note the update on adult social care debt, but no vote is required. Everyone happy? Right, the last substantive item that gives where we have decisions to take, and the other ones I'm going to push through fairly quickly, is item 9, adult social care charges review, with thanks to Justine and Tom leaving the table, Richard rejoining, and Patrick, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In the interest of time, I'll move forward. Richard's joining, and Richard can introduce himself when I hand over. And apologies today, committee, from Kirsten Clark, Service Director, who is unfortunately unwell and would have sat at the side of Richard and presented this paper. So this paper follows a real push from the political steer that we wanted to do a full scrutiny of our charging review and our approach to charging for adult social care. I think there has been views that officers have done similar reviews in the past but have not been satisfactory, and therefore we took the action earlier this year in terms of our business planning process to review our position around the legislation and guidance that is set to councils that have an adult social services responsibility and how they approach charging. A specific aspect of the review was brought out in line with the challenges around the cost of living crisis, and therefore there was an ask that we would take an anti-poverty view on our approach to charging, but also recognising any financial pressures within Cambridgeshire in the way that the charging policy was applied in those instances. The review explored 9 lines of inquiry, principally which was around our interpretation of the guidance and our development of a charging policy, and whether or not that was compliant with the legislation, but also whether it was similar or different to our peers and our other neighbouring authorities, but also authorities around the country and how they interpreted that guidance and applied it. It was also important that we used the review to understand where discretion was allowed and within the regulations, and whether or not we'd applied those discretions or not, and how in turn those discretions would give relief to people who were subject to the charging regime. We engaged an external resource to perform this review to demonstrate both critical challenge, but also somebody who had some experience and expertise of connecting with other councils to understand the approach for charging. I'll hand over to Richard, let him introduce himself, and then finish with presenting and opening up the paper for discussion.
Just to be courteous, I should introduce him and welcome him. And it's Richard Gibson, who is Head of Financial Operations. Richard, you're very welcome at our committee.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you very much. So if I'll just continue from where Patrick finished. So the outcome of the review is summarised in Appendix 1 within your papers. That appendix provides the assurance that the charging policy is compliant with the CARE Act, which was a crucial line of inquiry. It is applied equitably in line with legislation and guidance. It also described where there was flexibility or choice in the regulations, offering possible alternatives and anticipated outcomes. Excuse me. So the independent review made 28 recommendations, and after consideration, officers recommend 17 of these be presented to committee for a decision to progress, and those were set out in Appendix 2. So the recommendations being made to take forward are to provide clarity of position on policy for the council and for committee. So, for example, assurance that the policy is compliant with the Care Act applied equitably, assurance that the policy is consistent with what we call it CIPFA peers. So CIPFA is the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. So when we say CIPFA peers, we're talking about councils very similar to Cambridgeshire, wherever they might be within England. And finally, agreement that no changes be made to the minimum income guarantee or to disability-related expenditure allowances. The recommendations are also to explore genuine opportunity, for example. So to consider options for expanding the capacity of the council's welfare benefits team to support people to increase their income for both themselves, but also to maximise the income for their household. In doing so, that also supports our ambitions to be a fairer and more caring council, of course. Another opportunity is to produce appendices to the policy, the charging policy, to improve our transparency and informed decision making for more comprehensive information on disability related expenditure. So that's quite a challenge usually for our clients in terms of what may or may not be considered as disability related expenditure. And why that's important is where a client can claim something for disability related expenditure, DRE, that suppresses their client contribution, so it reduces the contribution that they would need to make towards care. So DRE is very important. And then finally, for transparency, many other councils share their typical cost of care. So we intend to publish our typical fees and charges for care. That will help self-funders make some informed decisions about and choices about how they arrange their affairs. Also, we'll also improve the information and guidance on fees and charges that sit outside of the policy, the charging policy. So, for example, a deferred payment agreement, so where a person is able to defer their care charges against their property, further information, enhanced information about deferred payment agreements, so that's better understood for people. I'll stop there, Chair, because I know you're short of time. I'd welcome any questions.
Thank you to you both. And in opening the debate, I just want to say this. It's been a bit of a process to get this report done, but I am delighted by the work that's taken place. I think the report that's been done is very balanced and very thorough. And I just want to place on record my thanks for everyone who's been involved with this. Questions and contributions? I've got Councillor Van der Ven first.
Thank you, Chair, and I would like to echo what you've just said. Your thanks to all, and it's very good to have this paper, and it's good that it's going to be looked at again. And I see it alongside other papers today as sort of getting our house in order. All that is very good. I'm most interested in the information and awareness, the communications campaign. I think in addition to understanding processes, the very question of financial planning for older age is a universal one. And I think questions or understandings of entitlement may not be clear. Most people are not going to be entitled to council-funded social care. I don't know how widely that's understood, but I think that needs to be very much in our, again, public consciousness. Along those lines, I would comment on the appeal process that is noted. It needs to be a meaningful one. I don't know how you make it, what's going to make it meaningful. That can't be a guaranteed outcome. I guess this kind of reminds me of the education transport appeals that many of us councillors are involved in, which involves post-16 transport to education and training. Parents often find it a complete shock that their child gets to that age and is not entitled to council care, council provision, transport provision. They come to an appeal, we have to apply policy, and the outcome is usually not going to produce the transport that people desperately need. There's an information campaign there needed too. I see this at the other end of life. We get older, we have absolute crucial needs, but our entitlement and how it all works comes to us as a surprise. So I would really encourage the communication to sort of take that spirit. And then on income maximization, we're always learning new terms. Our district councils are doing fantastic work and have been for several years since cost of living crisis really took hold. And as a district councillor myself, I'm aware of the work by South Cambs and Cambridge City Council together on the low income tracker for families likely to be in receipt of benefits and perhaps not claiming their full entitlement. So that's great work, and the collaboration there will be really important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bowden, please.
Thank you, Chair. In the last agenda item, we heard how difficult it is to budget accurately in adult social care, and particularly when we're talking about older people and residential care. And what was mentioned in the last agenda item was particularly the difficulty of the analysis of self-funders and the effect that they have on our liability as far as expenditure is concerned and what we need to budget for. And I think we've all agreed in more than one agenda item today that trying to get our budget as accurate as possible really is important, and we should take what efforts we can to put that forward. And that's why I was so surprised about paragraph 3.8 in this report. And in paragraph 3.8, it says that the 11 recommendations that officers didn't recommend to be presented to the committee are in the main regarding investment into business analytics and insights. And the examples given here of the development of a contributions forecasting tool to aid informed decision-making based on accurate impact data, and for the policy and insight team to provide analytical and statistical analysis of property and capital and income and assessed expenditure. And we're told that officers didn't recommend these to be taken forward as they don't provide value to those people who use the services. Well, that's entirely true. They don't provide value, direct value to those individuals, but they do provide absolutely vital value to the council itself in its forecasting. So by our failing to carry these forward, we're almost working with one hand tied behind our back in trying to ensure that we get the accurate budgeting, or as accurate a budgeting as we can, which we all agree we do need to have. Now, we're told in paragraph 3.7h that some of the other recommendations, it may well be some of these, which were proposed not to be progressed at this time, may have financial implications for the council, so will be considered during the business planning session for 26/7, which presumably means they wouldn't be able to come into effect until 27/8. Now, we seem to be missing a trick here. We know that we need to be better in our budgeting, yet we're failing to take the actions that we could take in order to get that information so that we minimize the chance of a significant error for next year, for the years following after next year.
Thank you. Question will have been heard and I'm sure will be answered. Councillor Boulat.
Thank you, Chair. In the report in the appendix in 6.4, there's a mention of the Poverty Strategy Commission. So my question is, first of all, to what extent the recommendations and the outcomes of that Poverty Commission, which will come out later, well, next year now, will be able to impact some of the discussions around this and the future planning of this. And then secondly, there's a mention around the lived experience engagement, part of the Poverty Commission. And I'm aware the Commission has quite a limited time and resources to engage with every single group that's affected, you know, in one way or another by living in poverty. So I was wondering if we'll actually manage to have any data that is representative enough for the specific group that engages with adult social care within that. I know there was discussions, for example, to do something specifically more around a group of young people or certain people who are less, for whom we know less what they are thinking about council services. But in terms of, this group, I wonder if we actually can have any learning specifically for those groups from the Poverty Commission and to what extent it can influence the future business planning discussions, for example, the 2026, 27 mentions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, my statement question falls between the last agenda item and this one, so forgive me if it flips back and forth. Outside these hallowed chambers, I am a case manager, which basically means, or one of my roles is a case manager, which basically means I work for solicitors. And one of the things I've been asked to do recently, not in this county by solicitors, is to check if somebody's getting good value for money with regards to their care. And I go in and I check how much care they have and how much they pay in and one thing and another. And I find quite often, and especially in the last 3 cases, they'll have an excellent value for money because they're getting 5 hours of care and they're not paying for them. And this is what we are now finding, is that the county councils, as I stress, not this particular county council, is actually providing care but not paying for, but not actually charging. And on each occasion, it saves the individual about £100 or £100 a week, about £5,000 a year. So those 3 particular people are costing the county £15,000. So as much as this charging policy I'm all for, I've got no problems with it at all, I would ask if sometimes we can go back to the very basics and make sure that we are actually charging for what we're actually providing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton.
Thank you. When I was reading this paper, I was reading it both as a member of this committee, but also as an individual who probably in the not too distant future will need to use some of these services. And I was thinking, what is the relationship between what's here in the paper and potential or actual users of the services? So it's rather similar to Councillor Howell's question. And has there been any input from users of the service into the development of the charging on the paper?
Great question. Councillor Slatter.
Yes, thank you for this report. I've printed it out because I need to look at it very carefully. But to pick up on page 136, I really welcome the Investor Save proposal to increase capacity of welfare benefits team. Good advice in the right early on is so helpful. And also, and maybe relevant to what Councillor Daunton has just said, that you're publicising what we pay so that self-funders or people who think, well, they can certainly self-fund for a bit, and the family want to know how much it's going to cost and help them through it. These are available. That gives them some comparison. And I would also ask if the complex relationship between investing to save in terms of accommodation, which is an item I think you were here already, Richard, for that with a committee. We stand to make savings in terms of economies of scale, either for the residents or possibly for the county, when people are co-located and you have place-based care, whether it's personal care that verges on nursing or even nursing care. And we would hopefully see benefits from that. I believe that the Manchester formula that was quoted earlier does take that into account, because I think that's really important, and a part of the integrated care service, that we see that having multiple visits from multiple people in cars and vans that are delivering the same service an hour later in another village when they could have done it next door. These are all things that we can help our residents to do sensibly and to their own benefit. Thank you.
Councillor Seif, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I would like to be able to respond to Councillor Howell. It's not really a question, but just a comment. I don't demur from anything you've said. I mean, you make a very good point. But on the other side of the equation, I don't know what the figures are, but there must be thousands of unpaid carers in our communities who we do not, and the county does not pay for, but who are looking after either elderly parents or actually a case that I know about, elderly people looking after a disabled child who is growing up to be a disabled adult, and we don't necessarily contribute very much towards that. So in a way, we're getting value for money through our own communities. We don't know the figures. I'm not suggesting for one moment we go out seeking the figures and spending more money, but you know, there's a plus and a minus in this whole equation, and I don't think we should ignore it.
And there are figures nationally on the role of informal carers and how much it's saving the public purse. Very good point. My own comments in conclusion, one is, you know, this is a council that has decided we want to explicitly combat poverty. And look, we've never looked at our charging policy in adult social care through an anti-poverty lens explicitly. We've done it now, and I really commend that. Secondly, we always knew that the options that would come forward, many of which will be too expensive in the short term. So they're really interesting proposals about disability-related expenditure, about the minimum income guarantee, around the costs charged for residential care, that we won't be able to implement in the short term because they're too damn expensive. But at least now we know what they are. We know what the options are. And I would appeal to officers to bear them in mind in the medium term as part of the equation that we keep under consideration. I do think, as Councillor Slatter said, I want to welcome the proposal around increased welfare benefit advisors. It's something very practical. It's going to pay itself back, and we're going to implement it by February, nice and quickly, really good. And so I want to really strongly endorse and commend that. And finally, whether you take what Councillor Howell said and what Councillor Seaves said, you know, in the end, we have to pay for services, and charges are part of the equation. But what this is doing, what this process is doing, is enabling us to be more transparent with ourselves, knowing what's going on and weighing that against the service needs and the anti-poverty considerations, and more transparent with our service users and with self-funders, as has been said in the debate about it. And that's why I think this is a very worthwhile exercise, and that the work that's been done should maintain front of mind as we engage in further decision making going forward. I also hope we can't refer reports constantly to the Anti-Poverty Commission, because it's got limited capacity, as Councillor Boulat has said. But I hope this work will be raised with the Anti-Poverty Commission, and that we'll be open to further recommendations from them in the light of their work. Richard Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and respond to the direct questions and be brief if I can. I think, Councillor Bowden, I think you made you noted, I should say, that one of the recommendations officers did not recommend putting forward was around analytics capability that would support forecasting. So in the context of this paper and this review, we were looking at client contributions and the charging policy just itself, so it's quite narrow. Absolutely agree in terms of that capability around broader forecasting around the cost of provider care, which of course is where the materiality of our spend is, and if that's volatile, then that's either a welcome or unwelcome surprise. So I think that's why in the charging review, it's not a strong recommendation in terms of value against the other actions that have been recommended, but fully agree in the broader context of forecasting, the better capability, the better. Councillor Boulat, apologies if I haven't got the question quite right, but I'll try and keep up. So I think you had a number of questions, but in principle, with the Poverty Strategy Commission, in terms of the output of their work, how does that link in with the adult charging policy? Effectively, when the Poverty Commission have completed that work, understanding their limitations in resources, as everybody suffers, that will be considered against the adult charging policy, also as Chair has suggested, because they would have to be. And I think from Councillor Daunton, the final question was, direct question was there any user engagement, so client engagement within the review of the charging policy? So no, but principally because the review was around the regulations, the Care Act, statutory guidance, and how those were applied. So it was about what the policy was doing. So was the policy compliant, equitable, so on and so forth. And user engagement would not have particularly supported that particular point of the review. I think that covers all the questions.
Okay, so we have recommendations which are to support the 17 recommendations in Appendix 2 and summarised in Section 3 of the report, and B, provide regular updates through spokesmeetings on their implementation. Can I have a look and see if I'm seeing nods? Yes, I am. So they're agreed by acclamation. Two choices, folks. I can carry on steaming through and probably we'll do questions only, but not do justice to the reports. Or we could change the agenda order, and because we've got the time at 3:15, we could just resume with item 10 at 3:15. I take guidance from anyone.
We've asked Director Health to talk about inequalities at 3:15.
Exactly. So we've got some choices to make. Yeah. Steve. Yeah, no, I'm seeing nods, so let's take that. I've heard three expressions there in that direction. So we're going to deal with 10, 11 and 12 fairly concisely. Questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so we could defer the risk paper because we reflected that on the
Executive Director is not using his microphone, but what he's saying is we could defer the risk paper because we've looked at the risk register relatively recently, and we can defer that to a next agenda. I'm just looking particularly at the opposition spokes, the risk register paper. No, so we will do it. So we'll take questions on. No, thank you for the suggestion, though, Patrick. So we'll take 10, 11 and 12 questions only. So 10, we've got Sarah Byrie joining us at the table. Adult Performance Monitoring Report. Any questions from members? No. So Sarah, you're let off for good behaviour. No vote is required. Item 11, Public Health Performance Monitoring Report, pages. It doesn't say here. What page is it? Page 179 to 188. Any questions, members? No, they are not. So that report is noted. We then go to item 12, risk register. Sarah's stayed at the table, which was a smart move. Can I take questions? Now, I know I've got at least one to my right.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. It concerns risk 3, which is the only risk which has any increased score, and that is risk 3 relates to the arrangements to support people with learning disabilities result in poor outcomes due to the uncertainty of decoupling of funding arrangements via the Section 75 agreement. Now, I talked earlier about my concerns about the potential bad debt that we may or may not face at some stage in the future, whether it be in this financial year or next. Or doubtful debt rather, but this is the other side of the equation, and this is how is the decoupling affecting the individuals concerned who relied on these services. And we were told when the Section 75 agreement was being terminated that that every care would be taken to ensure that the individuals concerned had a seamless process from what happened previously to what will happen in the future. We're now told, and I recognise the Executive Director's honesty in doing this, we're now told that the likelihood of them having poor outcomes as a result of the decoupling has gone from possible to likely. And we already recognise that the impact would be high on these individuals. We corporately have a risk appetite using the matrix system of 15. This takes this risk to 16, above our risk appetite. Now, I'm not going to talk, as you know, I can for hours about my attitude towards the matrix and towards our calculation of risk appetite, but nevertheless, the direction of travel is clear. We've got a problem at both ends on this Section 75 decoupling, and I think it's really important that we have a focus on the individuals concerned who are likely to be affected by the decoupling when we thought they wouldn't be, and how we can mitigate that to the extent that we can within the funding envelope we've got available to us.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Patrick to respond to that at the end. Councillor Howell.
Yeah, quick question, Chairman. With regards to number 8, risk factor 8, with regards to AMPs, are we Are we covered at the moment, or do we have any problems? And is there anything we can do to encourage people to take the additional training, or give them any incentives, such as paying for their personal liability insurance? Therefore, not to whoever takes regard in the fact they act in their own capacity, not under the instruction of the county. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Sarah to respond to Councillor Howell's question. I'm then going to say something myself and then ask Patrick to respond to Councillor Bowden's question. Sarah.
Thank you very much, Chair. So currently we do have coverage across the AMP rota. It's one of the things that we are looking into. So we have got we have registered an expression of interest to undertake a review of our AMP process against best practice standards, and we've had a kick-off meeting for that, and that will be done in the early part of next year. So we'll be able to update committee on that outcome of that as well in the early part of next year.
Thank you, Chairman.
On Councillor Bowden's point, I want to reiterate what I said earlier, which is I think we as a council should say something publicly fairly soon. I completely have already laid down, and we share the concern about the quality of service to service users as well as the financial implications, and it is proper that that is put. I think today is not the day to have a very substantive discussion about that, but I think as the question has been put, it's only fair to ask Patrick to say some words.
Thank you, Chair. So the first point is that from the last committee, which is in October when this risk paper was presented, there was recommendations around some of the actions, and one was around the learning disability, and challenged us as officers to go away and look at it. And I think in that challenge, we've sat down, we've reviewed it, and therefore we felt both we should escalate the risk to a 16 because it then becomes a corporate risk, and it's important that it doesn't just sit on the adults risk register, it sits on the corporate risk register. So now it's much more, it's heard by all, so it sits in a different place. So that was the first reason for escalating it. To stress that the people who use our services are our major priority, and ensuring that we continue with a seamless service is what our key priority is. There are three parties to the organisational form of the current arrangement. There are the council, there's the ICB, and there's Cambridge and Peterborough Foundation Trust. So CPFT and the council are the partnership that are working on the decoupling of the teams, and that's where our major priority is. We've got to reorganise our team, they have to reorganise theirs, but what our aim is that we continue to work with a clear focus on making sure that the seamless service that people have experienced for the last 20 years continues to go forward, even if the form doesn't sit as an integrated service. And Sally Shaw, who was sat at the back earlier, Sally's joined us as a service director who's got the lead for learning disability. We were approached this week by the ICB to ask whether she would take the lead on behalf of the partnership to take forward this piece of work, and Sally's working closely with colleagues in CPFT to ensure that we've got communication out to people who use services, and we will continue with that. But we're happy to have a further more detailed discussion with you about these circumstances as this progresses, but just to assure you that we are working and we do see that risk and we are working to address that.
Okay, all of that has gone on the record. I want to say, one, to thank our staff and endorse the work that they're doing at the moment, and say we have got every confidence in it on this issue. Secondly, that we will say something more publicly at a point soon about this. Thirdly, that we will ensure that the first spokes meeting that there's a very full report back so that the opposition can be fully appraised of some of the detail there isn't time in order to achieve for us today. The recommendation I need to find, which is to note the update. Also, I want to just say welcome the fact that you've increased the risk level and made it a corporate risk. I think that does accord with what we think. We regret it, but the fact that it's so important, it's a corporate risk, is something we should formally welcome, and I do welcome it. And I've looked again to our opposition colleagues who are nodding vigorously when I say that. Are people happy to note the updated risk register? Are people happy to note the agenda plan and training plan? No, they're not. Okay, so on the agenda plan, I'm just going to remind the officers that the accountability and apologies report from January a year ago is still not been taken, and so I really do want to see that on the March agenda plan, please. On the training plan, which is I know what colleagues have got to raise, I'm going to take Councillor Slatter first.
It was actually the agenda plan.
Sorry,
because I
apologies.
get my say on the members' development panel anyway.
Okay.
No, the agenda plan. I would very much like to see an update report on the Care Academy, because there may well be some decisions to be made in terms of possibly investing in supplementary training. And we've seen already several items as today whereby good personal care, preventative care, place-based care all fits together with council policies and can make life better for our residents. So please can we have an update? We had a launch and we haven't heard mention since. I'm obviously ferreting about, but I think all councillors should be aware of it because it's really useful stuff to have.
You and I have, and Councillor Van der Ven have definitely mentioned it since, but the call for an update is perfectly proper, obviously. Councillor Seif.
Thank you, Chair. The point that I made at the beginning of our meeting, I would very much like to request that we have a formal report on the RCRP process and its implementation. Yeah.
I think that was heard earlier and will be minuted, don't worry.
So it will appear on the agenda next time as a formal report.
Our request for that will be minuted. We then have to have discussions with Rachenda and colleagues about programming it, but the fact the committee wants it will be minuted. Okay. We now move to Councillor Van der Ven.
Thanks. For officers, how will the committee's experience of the past 4 years be tapped in planning for post-election new member training?
Rachenda, sorry to put you in it, but could you quickly respond to Councillor Van der Ven's question?
Yeah, very briefly. Certainly we'll be drawing that and through the member development panel, which is chaired by Councillor Slatter, so I'm sure she will have a view.
But will I be able to
I know
express
she's
it?
got a view, but I think we want you to take back to Democratic Services a keenness to feedback now from members in this term of office, what might be the priorities from the start of the new term of office, not just that panel, but the broader membership.
Yeah, I will absolutely take that, Chair.
Or we'll come back and haunt you.
Everybody else happy if we note the agenda plan and training plan? Adjourn back here at 2 o'clock promptly. Thank you, everyone. Sally Shaw's left the room, but can I just thank her? She's been sitting here throughout, not contributed. So can someone pass that on to her? And see you all at 2 o'clock.